So I'm going to not do the disservice of introducing the both of you because I might butcher it, very likely butcher it, as I've picked up your bios across several things and I haven't taken the time to actually write them down, you know, but I have it in my head, you know, just to say that I've done my 10 cents of work. So I want to start with you, Rahul. Obviously, I've seen your excerpts of you saying a bunch of things with a bunch of friends of mine on Twitter. That is how I first came to know of you. Who are you and what do you do right now?
Well, I'm a journalist and author. I've been a journalist and an author for like 30 years now, almost coming up to. I started my career when I was 20. I'm right now a consulting editor with TV18, the big TV18 group, and I anchor a show on News 18, CNN News 18, at 7 p.m. So that's what I do, and it's called The Hard Facts, and it's a show that I think most people should watch because they'll get a robust view of the news also on the back of hard facts, which are now becoming hard to find. So that's really my jam. I was the editorial director and the editor-in-chief of Times Now. Before that, I was the editor-in-chief of NewsX. I've been around.
Yeah, you've been around for a while. You also were a print journalist at some point. That's how you started your career, right?
Yes.
What were you doing then?
Well, so I was a reporter for the Times of India. I had written for some publications before that. I had worked with the Observer of Business and Politics, that's no longer around. But later, when I joined the Times of India, I was doing basically city reporting and covering the courts. And somewhere along the line, I was told by the group that I needed to put out X number of bylines if I was really going to be considered someone. So I exceeded the targets, and I think people just sort of woke up in the Times of India ecosystem and said, who's this new guy who's come in? I was very young. And in 99, 2000, I was asked to move from being a reporter right onto the edit page, which is like the ideas page, beating editorial muscle of any newspaper. And I was like, wow. It's
the one right above the speaking tree?
Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of these people, you know, had been journalists for 30 years, 25 years, like, you know, in their 50s, where I'm going to soon be. And they were some very big names. And I was like, what am I doing here? I'm just 24. So I was one of the youngest in the Times ecosystem to be on the edit page. I think Rajdeep was there when he was like 27, 28 or something like that. I'm not quite sure, but that was sort of the talk. So yeah, I started quite young in a very serious space. So that was good for me.
And still going seriously all these years later on.
Yeah, a bit too seriously. I wish I could, you know, trade places with you and basically let it all hang out a little bit and, you know, be a little more chilled. But I try.
No, this both dunya, how do I say it? It's just like the training, the times, they're all different, right?
Jaise aap keh rahe ho, waise hi acha.
And what about you, Siddharth? If you could just get closer to the mic.
Sure.
You can also adjust it like this. So yeah.
This way?
Yeah.
Well, I've been in the industry now for about 15 years. I began my career in journalism in 2008. And believe it or not, I began my career as a cricket journalist. I had a lot of interest in sports at one point.
You must have hated the finals then.
Well, actually, I've lost my interest in cricket, especially limited overs cricket, for some time. So earlier,
was that timely because of the final?
Quite
or just
timely.
Overall?
In fact, I mean, even the World Cup final, which happened to be, you know, taking place on a Sunday, we were all home. I did not catch the first ball as I would have done when I was really into cricket. And I'm going back about 15 years. So I began my career with Cricinfo, ESPN Cricinfo, as a ball-by-ball commentator. So
just for context, Cricinfo is the same website when you search India versus Pakistan and you go on the news section and a website comes up and you refresh it and it shows you a ball-by-ball commentary.
It shows you ball-by-ball commentary.
It's text-based, right?
It's entirely text commentary.
Yeah.
So, for example, you're watching the game on television, but for the benefit of those who are not able to see it on TV or for that matter on streaming, you're giving them ball-by-ball updates with as much detail as possible. So just for example, you know, if I were to say Jasprit Bumrah has just shown the ball and he's charging in towards the non-striker's stumps. He's just in his delivery stride. He's delivered a ball just in the corridor of uncertainty outside off stump, and and
were you not like on the edge?
Glenn Maxwell has left the ball to the keeper or something like that. It'll have to be as detailed as that.
But were you not on the edge because you were basically doing ball by ball, so you have to type faster than the gameplay?
You have to be extremely quick on your fingers,
Wow.
and that's one of the first challenges. So when you're exposed to ball by ball commentary.
Sorry, I'm just going to stop you there. Do you type with all 5 fingers or just 1 or 2 fingers like the rest of us?
No, you type with all 5 fingers, and
Okay.
you are constantly looking at the screen and not looking at the keyboard as you're typing. So it
Okay.
actually trains you very well. And you have to pay a lot of attention to detail, because you are assuming that the person reading the commentary on text is not able to watch the match.
Okay.
So therefore, your description will have to be very vivid, be extremely detailed. So that trained me well, and that's how I began. I was also a statistical analyst with Cricinfo, so I used to actually go through Ranji Trophy batting and bowling averages, Irani Cup batting and bowling averages, same thing for ODIs and T20s and Test matches, and I used to basically write statistical analytical pieces based on players' performance in a particular game, some of the statistical highlights that used to be put out at the end of each match, etc. And then I graduated to writing news articles about cricket, match bulletins, eventually got a chance to cover a few games as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I was always interested in politics and history on the side. And once you get into cricket and you cover it for about 5 years, as I did, you do reach a certain saturation point, at least for somebody with varied interests like I did. So that's when I realized I needed to transition to something else. But there are enough people who've covered cricket for decades and are enjoying it as much as they did on their first day.
Yeah.
But I thought I needed to move on to something else, which I did in 2013.
And so you started cycling.
Cycling came a couple of years after that. Cycling
Okay.
came in 2015, towards the end of 2015. And unfortunately, I've not been able to cycle much in the Delhi NCR region. I was in Bombay at that point
Because
in time.
we've got extremely nice AQI 15.
Not
I
just
checked
AQI,
yesterday.
I've seen, you just have to be at the wrong place at the wrong time to be at the receiving end of an unfortunate accident. But
Okay.
I've seen trucks drive on the wrong side of the road in Noida, even if you keep yourself to the complete left of the street. Not that doesn't happen in Bombay, which is where I come from. But I've cycled enough in Bombay to be confident enough to
Stop
to venture
cycling.
out without too much worry. But in NCR, I've seen a couple of instances where there've been very close shaves, and therefore I'm a bit paranoid, to be honest with you.
I understand. Do you cycle as well, Alan?
No, I don't cycle. I cycle on holiday.
Uh-huh.
Then you get all your thighs all stiff and all. But I do play tennis. I played squash for a long time.
Okay.
I played some competitive squash. Got damaged by it because it's a rough game. You have to be fit to play squash. You don't
can't
become,
be unfit and play squash.
Yeah, people say play a game and you'll become fit. This game you have to be fit to play that game. You have to be able to sustain yourself if you want to play at a certain level, of course, and you just don't want to only play for recreation. It's like boxing. You can't go unprepared into a ring. You'll get smashed.
Yeah.
So you have to build up your endurance. You have to be able to take a punch. So similarly, you have to do a lot of off court work in squash before you hit the squash court. And we used to do a lot of that, but it takes a lot of time. And when you're running a channel, you're managing a channel, then you're up from 7 in the morning, you don't sleep till 12 at night. Sometimes you don't sleep at all for 3 days, 4 days.
Yeah. So you decided
Today
verbal sports are better.
Yeah, verbal gymnastics when you're constantly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So context for today's discussion, of course, is your book, Modi in India. If you can show it to the camera. Yeah, 2024 and the battle for Bharat. इसके अंदर India क्यों नहीं लगाया भाई? What's with the new? I know this has been around for a while where people are now calling India Bharat. No, हाँ, वो है.
Battle
But
for Bharat, yeah.
no, but is it because of the India alliance? Or-
Yeah, so basically this is actually a play on the India alliance.
Okay.
So, we had a bit of a discussion, Siddhartha and myself. Siddhartha is a stickler for absolute fact. So he says, you can't put I.N.D.I.A because that's
not how they like to be identified. They're
Okay.
quite clear. We are India, so don't call us I.N.D.I.A.
Okay.
Even though the BJP and the others would call them the India Alliance. Remember,
Yeah.
they earlier began to call themselves as the India Alliance. The BJP insisted that you can't be an India Alliance because the last word the last word is an alliance, and therefore you're repeating alliance twice. So call them India Alliance. But the folks that belong to the India Alliance are quite categorical in saying identify as India. So do not add those dots in between.
So
And waste your breath.
so basically, this tells you that obviously the India Alliance has a particular view of Modi, and Modi has a particular view of them. And then there is a contest for the idea of Bharat. Why? Because Mr. Modi has been saying that, and the BJP has been investing in this sort of decolonization of the Indian mind, where they say that we have to borrow heavily from our civilizational ethos, which is a Bharatiya ethos. And that's how I want to construct the country over the next few years if I'm given a chance. That is what Mr. Modi says. And the India Alliance says, Inko to rokna, we have to stop him because he's taking this country on a path that is very far removed, according to them, from what we saw ourselves as in 1947. The republic we've given ourselves in 1947 is not the republic that Mr. Modi has in mind. He wants to build a Hindu Rashtra. And they say that he wants to build really a Hindu Pakistan. That's the words of, I think the most articulate person on that side of the fence, on the India side of the fence, is Mr. Shashi Tharoor. And that's how he's defined this context, in 2024. And some people also will tell you that it's our last opportunity to stop Modi, because after that it'll be too late, because a lot of legislative changes have been made.
Absolutely.
And, we've written about it in this book since 2019. You can...
Yeah, so you of course had the Article 370 virtual abrogation, which took place on the 5th of August 2019.
Of course.
There was the Citizenship Amendment Act that was brought towards the end of that year. There are lots of other legislations that have been contested in the Supreme Court. And
so they've not necessarily been contested by the BJP.
By the BJP. But
it might be people who are sympathetic to their worldview.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, these things are under challenge. Like, for example,
the Places of Worship Act.
The Places of Worship Act. Then most importantly, there's a chipping away at certain issues like, polygamy, nikah halala, many things like that, which many people say are out of whack with a secular democracy.
Because whether or not there ought to be a uniform civil code as well. And then, of course, you have the consecration of the Ram Mandir, which will happen now on the 22nd of January.
Which is my birthday.
22nd of January next year. And there was a huge controversy at the time that Mr. Modi attended the Bhumi Pujan ceremony.
Which is something he's not supposed to do as per the book, right? Because he...
No, we didn't say that.
We never
are
said that.
addressing the criticism.
Yeah, the criticism was that he wasn't supposed to be there, right?
He wasn't supposed to be there, and we counter that by saying that what's really wrong if somebody wants to exhibit their religiosity.
We're explaining the background as to why he...
And may I ask if, say, before 2014, what were your political positions? Did you always...
So, I speak for myself here.
Of course.
Of course. Is more of a centrist. I am slightly right of center, whatever that means in the Indian context, because there's, as we were talking earlier, there is no real strict separation, but we'll talk about that. So I, as a young man, had started reading. Look, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm half Kashmiri and I'm half Kannadiga. So half my family suffered. We were Hindu Kashmiris who suffered because of what happened, the Holocaust, as we like to describe it. And we couldn't understand why it happened to us. And we couldn't understand people who tried to rationalize it and say that, they were the dominant community, so there was resentment against them because they had maximum access to all the top positions, and they had, at some level or the other, basically glommed all the resources, and there was this backlash. No, it wasn't that. There was a religious backlash targeting us because we were Hindus. And we were driven out. And there's enough evidence of this. And in our family also there have been experiences. So along with millions, hundreds of thousands of others hundreds of thousands of other Kashmiri Hindus, we left the valley. And I couldn't understand, and there's a lot of conversation in the family. People would bemoan what we lost. And I began to read up on it. And I found there's very little to read up. No one had really recorded it. And as a young man at the age of 17, 16, I was told I was a migrant. Now, that's a very specific word. A migrant means that you moved voluntarily for better prospects out of the valley, that you're not somebody who has moved because you were made to move. So, migrant, immigrant, that can be a little bit of... We are refugees in our own land. That is what we were. No one was calling us that. Even the state doesn't call us that. So I started reading up, and it took me down a path where I was reading some very great names who wrote from a conservative point of view. I don't agree with some of the cultural conservative, constructs, but certainly their political ideology, I really imbibed.
Yeah.
So, there's François Gauthier. I think, there was T.V.R. Shenoy. There was a very great editor called Girilal Jain of the Times of India. So they influenced me, and I said, I want to be like them. And I want to understand where they're coming from. And I came from a family where they were leftists, declared leftists. And
Such
I
as,
realized,
just for context?
okay, so my mother's side of the family comes from the Thapar clan. So her cousin was Romila Thapar, is Romila Thapar, was Ramesh Thapar, who was, the founder of the seminar. He had a great past because he did fight for the freedom of expression. There's a great judgment that he secured for the press at large in the 50s. But he was a card-carrying Marxist, right? He was a member of the left parties. And then he became part of the kitchen cabinet of Indira Gandhi and, got sinecures from the Gandhi government, from Congress governments. And so there was a preponderance of those views. Karan Thapar is my uncle. So, they have a particular worldview, all credit to them for having that worldview. That's their lookout and they defend it. But I find that there are certain things that are questionable about their views, which can be challenged. But I find that it's very difficult to challenge some of those positions because if you do, then you're lumped with some Sanghi people, And I don't know why that happens. There's also cancel culture. So if you take on a loosely defined Congress ecosystem or what is known as the Lutyens consensus, it's very tough if you're still in the mainstream media. And you will be attacked for your views. People will label you harshly without taking the time out to understand the nuances. So a lot of that is misplaced. And I've had a history of talking about certain issues which are associated with the RSS because they're communal. How can UCC be communal, for example? You want one law for everybody. It'll affect Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, everyone equally. How is that a communal instrument? It's actually the edifice of a secular nation. That you don't have allowances on the basis of religion for X, Y, and Z, which privileges them over somebody else. In this case, the Hindu community a lot of times. So I couldn't understand that. Why is it being associated? Just because they've raised it. Maybe they're intellectually more honest than the left. That's why they raise it. Then Article 370, when we began to read about Article 370 as a young man, I said, but this is really a temporary provision. So why is it still there? And then you begin to look at it and you say that it's been diluted over the years. So there's only basically a shell. And then, of course, as we are saying, that in August, you suddenly had Mr. Modi step up and say, let's scrap it. And there was this huge outpouring as if he had, taken the saw to India's secular, constitutional edifice. And I'm like, but wo to waise hi khokhla ho gaya tha. It was only there in name. Yes, there were certain aspects of it, 35A, which is slightly out of it. But taken together, they were still very discriminatory. And I said, but what is wrong? You want to integrate both psychologically and obviously politically Kashmir with India. You have to get rid of this. It's temporary in any case. The UCC...
It was reduced to being symbolic because on 54 occasions between the time that we became independent to 2019, the central government had stepped in to ensure that central laws were eventually applied to Jammu and Kashmir. So the article had been diluted to a very large extent.
It's mentioned here.
So what the Bharatiya Janata Party ended up doing was taking it one step further and adding to what a bulk of successive governments over the years had actually already done.
Yeah.
So, sure, it was monumental to the extent that it was also sending out a very strong message. But a bulk of the work in terms of rendering Article 370 insignificant had been done already by previous governments, including several Congress governments.
I wanted to ask you, were you saying all of these things before Modi came around?
I mean, I've written editorials when I was a 28-year-old man.
And did you get the same sort of traction? Abhi kya hai, for example, ever since the Modi government came around, right? There is more of a place for what is wrongly defined as the right in India for intellectuals to thrive under that. Isse pehle inko mauka nahi milta tha, right? And would you categorize yourself as someone who was trying to find a place to say these things but could never find it and could only find it once 2014 came around?
So I'll agree with you partially. There were places, but there was always a caveat. So if you wrote a piece on advocating the scrapping of Article 3, and the very next day someone write a counter. Now that's a very healthy process. But I noticed that many issues that the left was sort of championing, there would never be a counter from the right. So only if right would, if people on the conservative side, so-called conservative side of the fence were writing. I consider myself a progressive conservative.
What does that mean?
So I'm progressive on social issues. So I support gay marriages. I think there's nothing wrong in, decriminalizing homosexuality, one. I believe that women must be given a right over their own bodies. I was shocked that the Supreme Court couldn't bring itself, it said what it did just recently in
the reversal of Roe versus Wade.
In the reversal.
But that was in the United States, not here.
Here also, there was a case where a lady was pregnant, advanced stage.
Oh, that's the recent case.
That's the recent case. And I was shocked that what was considered pretty liberal democracy, judiciary, took this position. So I felt we were going back on women's rights issues. I think every human being should have a right over their body. And I didn't understand where this was coming from, because it's not even in our Shastras or I can understand that in certain conservative Christian and, perhaps even, I can't speak for Islam because I don't know, but certainly because, this issue comes up a lot and it's associated a lot with the Catholic Church, right? I know more about that. But when it comes up, it has a religious sort of connotation. In India, that's not the way we've looked at issues. So I was surprised that the Supreme Court was prepared to sort of walk back a little bit from a very advanced position that they themselves had taken in a previous instance or in two previous instances. So, I have no problems, for example, with decriminalization of adultery. I have a problem right now with the new IPC that seems to suggest that we're bringing it back.
Yeah, but they want to make it gender neutral.
Gender neutral. And I'm like, why have a concept like that? Individuals should be allowed to sort of, consensually do whatever they want to do.
So you're saying adultery in the country is criminalized?
Adultery was criminalized under Section 497 of the Indian Penal Code.
So if you cheated, you could go to jail?
No.
So here's the law. Here's how the law stood. Imagine a married couple, a husband and a wife. A man ends up having an affair with the wife, and therefore that man can be tried under adultery in the event that the husband files a complaint. Not the woman. So that was how the law existed.
But how is adultery punishable?
So there is misogyny. Because a woman is therefore thought to be
the property of the man, which is the chattel. So which is why the Supreme Court, when it struck down adultery as unconstitutional in 2018, that's what the Supreme Court said.
So you're saying before 2018, you could actually be arrested as a man for cheating on your wife,
No.
Cheating on
the man who has an affair with your wife can be tried for adultery if the husband complains,
and even if they're both consenting.
So if you were a man and you somehow had an affair with my wife,
so far I identify as a man.
Yeah. Well, that's a good one. Sorry. If you are right now a man and you had an affair with my wife, I could go to the police and say, this guy should be arrested.
Okay.
And my wife, of course, is cool because usko to tempt kiya hoga, like Eve was tempted, you see. So the preponderance of the law would fall on you.
That's what the court clearly said. You're treating your wife as property under that particular status quo. And you're completely eliminating the woman's right to agency. And therefore, the law was rightly struck down.
So hang on. Look, just before we go into the weeds of this, just very quickly, I know where you were coming from on that question about before this and before that. I have been consistently a political conservative. I have no skeletons in my cupboard. I call out, the one thing I consistently also do is to call out extremism on both sides of the fence. If it's by Hindus or it's by Muslims, I have done it all my life. I have no contradictions here. I'm not a hypocrite. I stay with what I have, and I find myself, I think that we are matured to a certain extent that somebody like me can survive in a system like this. There's always pressure from colleagues, from others in the larger journalistic ecosystem who may not want you to write a particular kind of line for a particular paper, so you get a bit of pushback. Maybe, no, we don't want to because this is like too out there, But I've noticed, to answer your question again, that things are changing. There is more room now. And when there's not room, you start your own.
Of course.
So, like you guys have done. which is
Yeah.
great.
Although we have a completely different ecosystem of how that works. I want to discuss that as well. But on the issue of women, I noticed that in your book, I think you quoted a scholar who then quoted a feminist scholar who talked about how the symbols of Bharat Mata and Vande Mataram, the feminization of India, had largely died down once we had independence, right? And I found that very amusing because I still see people around me, anecdotally, saying Bharat Mata Ki Jai and all of those other slogans. But I was wondering why that was the case in your book.
Well, I think you're referring to Mr. Gurumurthy.
Yeah, Mr. Gurumurthy, yeah.
Mr. Gurumurthy, who said that we were very proud of Vande Mataram, as well as slogans like Bharat Mata Ki Jai well before independence, and some of the leading lights of our independence movement, including Mr. Nehru,
And
who he
Muslims
compliments,
in the Congress.
and Muslims as well,
Used to
unhesitatingly partake in these slogans. But
no, and they would sing the entire unabridged Vande Mataram.
Yeah.
So, like Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad,
yeah.
he's, and there are many other Muslims in the Congress that had no problems with singing.
Yeah. Though in 1937 there was a compromise that was struck where only the first two stanzas could be sung officially at Congress Party forums. So that was a compromise that Nehru made. And this was, of course, after a whole lot of objections had been raised by certain members of the Muslim community, including the Muslim League's Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who believed that the song was communal. What Gurumurthy was driving at is the fact that it's after independence that Vande Mataram has become quite politicized. Why should a song which holds the country in reverence and Bharat Mata in reverence be frowned upon by a certain section of the population, or a certain section within that certain section of the
The
population?
Vande Mataram as an anthem was first, part of Bankim.
Bankim.
Yeah. So, excuse me. So, he wrote the great defining Anand Mat, right? And I have to tell you this, that the first time the word Hindutva were used, and this is something that, we should have actually included in our book. The first time Hindutva was used was by him in Anand Mat. And people today ascribe it to one person, Savarkar.
Yeah. Savarkar popularized the term Hindutva. The first time it was used was Mr. Chandra Mohan Bose.
Yeah.
But it actually started gaining traction after Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay used it, as well as Rabindranath Tagore. Now, these two, hugely influential personalities ended up using the word Hindutva long before Savarkar did. Though Savarkar, of course, popularized the term and gave it a certain precise definition. Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, like you rightly said, talked about universal love being a very significant trait of Hindutva. Rabindranath Tagore also spoke about it being, something that's very accommodating and very inclusive in nature.
It was the essence of our philosophical and intellectual Hindu past.
But would you say, as far as the philosophical and intellectual nature of Hindutva, the word is concerned, it doesn't often reflect in practice? This word is often used to inflict terror on other communities in the country, using the word as a good scapegoat.
No, I think you're confusing that with Jai Shri Ram. People say, that's become a weaponized slogan.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Yeah.
Like
so Hindutva, the ideology is supposed to be exclusivist. That's what the left says. But that's not true. That's where the book comes in. Where that's the argument we supply in this book. We trace the intellectual origins of Hindutva, the movement. And you have to remember that Savarkar was also a man of his times. He came from a particular geographical space where there was a lot of communal violence that was happening. And it's debatable whether the Muslims were the aggressors or the Hindus were sort of trying to hold on and retain a certain degree of dominance, or call it, just secure their existence in that part of Maharashtra. But there was a lot of tension. So as a young man, he was saying that, look, our faith, our worldview, our way of life is under threat. And if you look globally, both Islam and Christianity have been proselytizing faiths. They have not allowed for other dispensations
that is true.
That subscribe to other worldviews to exist. So India is an outlier. The Chinese, Southeast Asia, again, some parts of Southeast Asia. Otherwise, Islam has had a huge impact there also. So in the East, fundamentally, and some pockets of North Africa, where there are still some animist traditions that are alive, and some very small pockets of Latin America, but they're very small and minuscule, in comparison to the larger. Islam and Christianity have run roughshod over indigenous traditions. You look at Australia, you won't find, the Aborigine way unless now an attempt.
Unless they're in amusement parks, generally.
Exactly. Yeah. Or there are these spaces that are called, reservations. I mean, look at the word. Like you're going to like a reservation to see So they are the inheritors of the Christians are the inheritors of this land. They are not the original inhabitants. You go to America, where is the, nativist American sort of tradition there? It's gone, it's finished. So it's run over. So obviously these people were saying that ye hamara bhi haal ho jayega. And the Hindu tradition has lived on and coexisted. And, we've talked about that. And it was very open, tolerant tradition. So there's a chapter. So, I was very keen that we have these sort of, some people call them my sort of, headline writing sort of, knack coming in here. But these subheaders are important markers in this book, because under each subheader, under the larger chapter, we tackle things, So it was easy to write the book once you had the superstructure in place, and then you just slotted in the arguments. I mean, I have to credit Siddhartha, because as you can see, he's more detail oriented.
Yeah.
So that's how we sort of came together. He would like, you can't just write like an editorialist. I mean, come on, how can you make this? And he would, challenge me. So then he would go hunting for, the thing to sort of corroborate it. And then there were many times when, a lot of things that become facts are actually born out of nothing, really. And they just repeat it so often that you take them for granted. So
of course.
The book is, very detailed, and he had I was the editor of a channel, very distracted. And the one thing I was not looking forward to when Penguin approached us
is to write the book.
is to write, but to annotate it, And I said, oh my God, ye maine kya keh diya? I said, hi, and yes, I'll do it. But when, it's a lot of work, and there's 100 pages of just footnotes. And
397 pages, right? In
397 pages. I think we've the text itself is about 240 odd. The rest
are
all footnotes.
237.
More than 1,000 odd footnotes. We thought it just makes sense to annotate
everything
as much as possible.
Because people would have gone for me. I know. I mean, he would have been okay, but they would have come after me. They would have said, this guy, people. I'm a divisive figure. I know a lot of people sort of have very strong.
Why do you think you're a divisive figure? What is it about you that irks people so much?
I'll tell you what it is, and I've thought about this. I have intellectualized in the mainstream media a particular discourse, and that for a long time was thought to be the preserve of lumpens. So if you read some very great writers who are on the conservative side, of course I don't agree with everything they've written, but so if you read them, they had said that very importantly, and I'll now use a name called Edward W. Said. So what is the first image you get of Palestinians? वो पत्थर फेंकने वाले, right? They are just out there doing anarchy, right? But that's not the case. So a lot of people decided that you have to give them an intellectual voice to fight the intellectual ideas that have allowed certain people to subjugate them. Just like the West used a whole bunch of Renaissance ideas to say that you guys are primitive, तुम्हारा तो कुछ नहीं होगा.
You need the enlightenment of the Western man to thrive.
Exactly. As if we didn't have republicanism, which we have pointed to in our book. We've had roots of republicanism. We had elected bodies that ruled in India, certain small areas of land, and we had a tradition of this. We would have come to our own Renaissance, our own enlightenment. We were far more enlightened in a lot of issues. If you read our Shastras and Dharam Shastras, and you read, the Vedas are so practical in some ways. I mean, look at the Gita, for example. Not a Veda, but look at the Gita, for example. It is a treatise which deals with fundamental dilemmas. And it is divorced from, religion. So it allows you that space. Within our own, Hindu tradition, there are 6 philosophical traditions which allow you to even not be religious.
Question the existence of the Charvaka tradition, for example.
Of course.
So this is an important, conversation that one had to promote. And it had to be intellectualized, and I brought it into the mainstream media. And people said, he has broken a taboo. We don't bring this kind of stuff. We don't talk about Islamist.
What's the line that you're supposed to toe as some of your peers toe? What's the line that you have to toe?
So look, I mean, there has been a left tradition. So a lot of people who
in newsrooms?
Yeah. So, that is a difficult, it's still very entrenched. So a lot of people will flinch at what you're saying. So if you say, for example, that why is it that, Hindu temples have been, regulated for so long? Why shouldn't everyone's temple? Or why do we have this waqf? Why is it coming?
Yeah.
So people get very jittery. They say.
But is it not because when you're a newscaster or a news, when you're an anchor or you run a show, you're not only broadcasting just Hindus, but also other minorities in the country. You're broadcasting to everyone.
But I would think that a lot of, no religion at its core. Now, there are people who will say that's not true. But I believe fundamentally in the goodness of human beings. No religion at its fundamental core is violent and exclusivist. Right? I know there'll be people who'll cite, but you can argue that there were a context when those books were written, and there was a way, on the Hindu side also, there are texts which are not very pleasantly disposed towards women, for example, the Smriti. So I'm just generally saying, there are books, and I'm not trying to create, any excuses for what is written there or what is not, but there was a context in which those things were spelled out, and it devolves upon the adherents of that faith to sort of move away and reform, right, Siddharth? Reform the tradition so that we move on and we give people a universal sense of, acceptability. So if you talk about those issues and you talk about, there is a strain right now out there which promotes terror, and they link it back to a certain dogma. And that is religious terrorism. There's no other way of looking at it. If you use those words, if you talk about those issues, they'll say, "Arey bhai, ye to fundamentalist." So people call me RSS. Rahul Shivshankar has become RSS, and that's the way it's used. And in many newsrooms, people will unabashedly say RSS. And I'm like, if you only knew I was probably more liberal than you will ever be, because I listen to the other side. Other side cancels you. So, कोई पार्टी आपको guest नहीं भेजेगी आपके show पे, कोई आपको बुलाएगी नहीं, कोई interview नहीं देंगे. I'm like, let's have it out, man. We live in a democracy. You have a point of view, listen to mine. Let the viewer decide who's right.
Sure.
Let the market decide.
One of the lines in the book, when the book is just opening, is about Hindus should not be ashamed of the nostalgia that they have for their past, and they should be allowed to reclaim it. I thought there is a lot of, and I'm speaking anecdotally, of course. I do not have the hard facts like you guys do, right? Because you've written this book. But I do notice that this idea of trying to glorify our past doesn't really have a timeline. How far back should we really go to justice? 1000 saal, 2000 saal, 3000 saal. And does that also mean that we also bring back some of the regressive practices that we did as a religion right now, right? So because it's Modi and India, and it's the battle for Bharat, and Bharat ke ab civilization, this is a word I'd never heard when I was growing up. It certainly started booming in the last 10 years or so. So how far back do we go till we're finally convinced that yaar hamara quote unquote Hindu Rashtra, jo sab log banana cha rahe the, jiske itne sapne the, wo ban chuka hai.
Now, the idea of a Hindu Rashtra is an interesting one. It's something, one of the reasons why we wrote the book is because these two words are not going to escape our discourse in some time to come.
Even if we try to steer away from them?
Absolutely. Because I think we're not making a case for a Hindu Rashtra, but what we're saying is that the idea of a Hindu Rashtra, even if it does materialize, given the kind of political milieu that we might head into, need not necessarily be an exclusivist one if it stays true to the concept of dharma. What we're basically saying is that even if you do have, in an extreme scenario, in a worst case scenario, in 2029 or 2034, a state which identifies with the Hindu faith.
A Hindu Rajya.
Or a Hindu Rajya.
So theocracy.
Not a Hindu Rashtra.
A theocracy.
A theocracy would basically mean state ruled by religious heads.
But if we're a Hindu Rashtra, automatically hum both ban nahi jayenge.
Well,
like Saudi Arabia has an Islamic government, right? So
Hindu Rashtra and Hindu Rajya are two different things.
Yeah.
So चलो आप पहले बोलिए.
A Rajya would be, so I think we're talking more in terms of a Rajya here, where the state has a religion. So suppose we have the Hindu religion as India's national identity as a state. Okay, we may not get there, but even if we do, does this Hindu state necessarily have to be exclusivist? The theory that we postulate is that no, because there are various examples that we can actually draw from in different parts of the world, where certain countries might have identified with a particular religion, but are not exclusivist. So Britain, for example, follows Anglican Christianity.
That's their official religion?
Yeah. That's their official religion.
It's like the established, religion.
And there are bishops who are appointed by the state, and despite all of that, and of course the state partakes in religious celebrations,
and some of them are also
Christmas.
sitting in parliament.
Yeah.
And they actually also, secular laws also, they have a say in determining the fate of those laws.
And yet, you do have a prime minister today who swears by the Gita, who identifies openly as a Hindu. And the religious character of the British state has not come in the way of his appointment as prime minister. So, and it's not just that. In fact, even though the British state identifies with, the English state identifies with the Anglican religion, there are minorities who live within the UK who see the establishment of a Christian state not necessarily in very adverse terms. And that's because the idea of a religious state has evolved over time in the United Kingdom, with the British monarchy, for example, at the time of Queen Elizabeth, when she gave that speech where she said that you should not look at us being an Anglican state in very adversarial terms. We are basically somebody who are inclined towards spirituality, and just because we have a religious identity would also enjoin upon us to protect all other religions that operate within our territory.
So basically what happened was that in 1700s, they came up with a concept called civil religion.
Yes.
So what was that? That was a Russian, René Rousseau, who was a great
of course,
philosopher. He came up with this concept where he says that, look, some of these guys who have hijacked our faith, which is the laity, which is the priestly class, they have made it an uncivil religion. उन्होंने ऐसी चीज़ें उस religion में they have put in, like some people can argue that, the caste system was brought in by Brahmins, for supremacy, that. So there also, there were certain issues. So like they used to sell indulgences, for example. So basically, आपने कोई भी crime किया हो, you go, you buy the indulgence, सब माफ. It's like their equivalent of कि हमने डुबकी मार दी, हमारे cleanse हो गए, So that is their sort of, but they used to sell them, and that was breeding corruption, and there were a lot of other things that happened, like women, their, their position, this, that, the other, and obviously it was also having a bearing on the way you evolved a concept. If you said, no, actually, it's the earth that revolves around the sun, you would be jailed or burnt, to a state.
Of course.
So it was obviously stopping a lot of people from really saying what was the truth, right? So they said, get rid of these uncivil people. Let's come up with a civil religion, which goes back to the original fundamentals of Christianity. What are those? Christ was a lovely man. He said we should have the brotherhood of man. He was a sufferer. He was the first martyr. The first martyr ever was Jesus Christ. So in the Hindu faith, and so this is quite similar to our faith, you see, or our tradition. Let's not even call it a faith. Some people will object. So our faith is a very inclusive one. So let's go back to our civil, a sort of more civil architecture, where everyone was considered equal, and not that part of our tradition that we should be ashamed of, which is, the caste system or some other things that we introduced, which were abhorrent and seconded women interests and many other things. So if you go back to that time, the golden age, as people would say, usme kya kharabi hai? Usme to you were all loosey-goosey. You were, it was like, let's live and let others live. So if you go back to that, which was our original dharma, and it continues to be, and you see it as we have written in our book, on many occasions, those beautiful words are put in our buildings, they are in our constitution, they are in our, in the Supreme Court mottos, in our army motto. Those are hugely, they're pithy, but they're great concepts. And they tell you that actually India has perhaps got the greatest philosophy, that can actually benefit the world today. Look at what is happening in the world. People are killing each other because they are not the same. They don't look the same. They don't talk the same. They don't feel the same. They don't love the same. There's so much going on. But here is a tradition. And, Siddharth, why don't you elaborate on some of what we found when we did the research on the Hindu Rajyas of the past?
Yeah, so we, of course, spoke to Meenakshi Jain, the historian. We had a very elaborate exchange with her, where she, of course, told us about the tolerance that was very much on display during the times of Shivaji, for example, in what is present-day Deccan.
Why do you have to use the word tolerance? It's almost like...
Yeah, in fact, I correct myself. I should actually use the word accommodation and acceptance. And I see where you're coming from, because the word tolerance has
हम बर्दाश्त कर रहे हैं किसी तरह से बस.
You tolerate something that you may not necessarily like. So
yeah.
The right word there would be acceptance as well as embracing or accommodation. Similarly, you had the exemplary case of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, a Sikh man Sikh king who ended up, celebrating or commemorating Muharram with his cadre, with his soldiers, and partook in the religious processions that actually took place. The only thing that he took an exception to was the playing of the azan on certain occasions. And of course, he had a very stringent view against cow slaughter as well. So those were things that he proscribed. But apart from that, in terms of his acceptance of Muslims within his army or as ministers, or for that matter, some of his most trusted confidants were members of the Muslim community. And these are some examples that we highlight.
And where is this coming from?
Yeah,
Let me read a small little
of course.
5 lines from this book, right? So we're basically talking about this chapter, which is called Hindu Rajya, a study of inclusivity from the past. So we've quoted out of Ram Madhav, who is a member of the RSS's national executive, and he suggests in the Hindutva paradigm that a king in ancient times was made aware of the limits of his power on coronation day itself. So Madhav recollects how the Bharatiya Jansangh stalwart Deen Dayal Upadhyay would retell a colorful story to emphasize how the king would be made aware of the constraints of his powers through a fairly elaborate ritual. And I quote, "In older times, during the coronation ceremony, the king would declare, 'Adandosmi, Adandosmi,' meaning no one can punish me, because I am supreme. Then the royal priest would raise his staff and gently hit the king on the back, saying, 'Dharma dandayosi,' meaning dharma, the rule of law, will punish you. Aapke upar bhi kuch hai." The king would then run around the sacred fire and the priest would follow him with the staff. Thus, after completing 3 rounds, the ceremony would come to an end, wherein the king would be unambiguously told that not he, but dharma would be the absolute sovereign. And what was that dharma? Ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. That there is a truth, but the ways to that truth are many.
Of course.
So be tolerant. Listen. सुनने की क्षमता रखो भाई साहब. That's where our tradition of democracy and samvad comes. So it can all be trade.
Dharma is distinct from religion, something that the Supreme Court has also emphasized. In fact, some of the most detailed discourses on dharma, apart from having been also held during the Constituent Assembly debates at the time that the Constitution was being adopted, have also come in many of the verdicts of the Supreme Court or observations of the Supreme Court. And it's fascinating to read them as well, about how the Supreme Court itself in multiple judgments has drawn a distinction between dharma as well as religion. And which is why towards the end of the book, in the final chapter before you come to the footnotes and the conclusion, we actually ask as to why, if the Supreme Court itself is not averse to the idea of dharma as a governing principle as far as the responsibilities of the state are concerned, then why be averse to the idea of a Dharma Rashtra or a Dharmic Republic, if not a Hindu Rashtra, since we're drawing a distinction here. So that's one very interesting thesis.
I mean, but that is still only a wordplay.
Yeah, it's still a wordplay.
Basically, dharma to, it's tied in with...
The progenitor of that is...
It's tied in with our Hindu way.
And have you had readers from other sects, like Sikhs, Christians and Muslims? Have they reached out? Like, what do they think about this? Because this is basically... Sare Hindu to Kush, of course, because it just means that we're going to be... When I say we, I mean everyone who identifies as Hindus, born in the Sanatan Dharma, un sabke liye badhiya. But everyone else, even though you say it's inclusive, what is said in theory and what is done in practice in the next 10 years, we're not sure of, right? ये तो हम एक utopia बनाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं.
But, my point is that, look, you have to sort of look at it from the point of view of what we are doing right now. If you want to build an argument into the future, you can only look at the future through what is happening now. So I want you to name me, and this is the response I will have. Because see, some people are so set in their ways that you can throw anything at them. They will not change. My idea is not to change people and their point of view. His idea is not that. We wrote this book to put a counter narrative out to what we hear constantly, whether it is from Harvard, or it is from Oxford, or it is from certain politicians, ki if you are subscribing to a Hindu ethos, you must be RSS fundamentalist. And a lot of people will also try and, draw this distinction. No, you are on the Hindutva side of the fence. And
no, I didn't say that. What I'm trying to ask is कि अगर मैं एक सिख इंसान हूँ और मैं podcast देख रहा हूँ और हम हिंदूज की बात कर रहे हैं तो मेरा क्या रोल आएगा इसके अंदर? Where do I stand?
No, but the Sikhs it's a dharmic tradition. They also are a dharmic faith. So they are also not somebody who is sworn to looking at the world from the prism of kufr. कि आप हैं और हम हैं. Right? हम अलग हैं. ऐसा नहीं. ये तो unfortunately politicians, because they look at, their constituencies, they try to create these divisions. And they try to then tell you that, look, you're under attack from the other side. So you vote for me because I'll save you guys. So this is a bit of political play. Now, yes, you're right. Wait, this could become like the de rigueur position. And somewhere in the West, you see it. Sometimes.
Sorry, what is the de rigueur position?
That it may just become the fallback position of politicians. They say, no, we have to become one to take on the other. And it has happened. Jinnah did it successfully in this country. He planted the seed of, separatism, saying that you will never be able to live with your Hindu brothers. Today, you go to Pakistan, you will find it difficult to find a Hindu. And here, just the opposite. So there must be something about the majority community and the way it thinks that we allow other traditions to prosper. So where does this come from? It has come from our dharma. Now, to address this question, where are we going into future? You look at the present. Under the Congress and under other opposition governments, you actually had policies which have distinguished between people on the basis of either their religion or some other practices, right? Mostly religion. In this government, we have had now, 9 years of rule? I don't remember one particular policy that discriminates specifically against one community, one law, one policy.
Sure.
You can point it out to me.
But then there is, I will play devil's advocate, right?
No,
as I must. There is also a PM who, despite lauding Hindu Rashtra and sabka bhala karna and being very strong from a foreign policy standpoint and actually helping brand India, right? Like, because India is now shining in the world like never before. Like an Indian PM actually has respect. India is seen as a serious player in all geopolitical matters, all bilateral talks, everywhere else. Yet this is a PM that refuses to have any press conferences. You're a member of the media, right? And so I ask you, like, why does this... Maybe you don't have the answer about कि वो press conference क्यों नहीं करते. But would you agree that...
I mean, look, you should have press conferences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have no problems with saying
that. One way to make sure कि हम जो बोल रहे हैं वो actually होए is actually to disseminate through the media, right? But this government just operates in the shadows.
You see, here I have talked about this in the past. I don't think that anyone should basically not face the press on the press's terms. Now, if you look at our history when it comes to free speech, we started tampering to restrict it from almost day one, even before day one, before we adopted our constitution.
Yeah, Nehru had a very weird policy around it. It's written in the constitution.
So you started diluting.
First Amendment.
And you look at the trajectory. I mean, look at Britain, for example. Many people say America is the oldest democracy. In some ways, the democratic tradition, where iconoclasm was celebrated almost as a national trait. There were magazines that were devoted only to bringing out cartoons, that would lampoon people, where nothing was sacred. You could go after anybody. And the British are the most irreverent.
Of course. Yeah.
That tradition was never allowed to flourish here. It's not just Modi's fault. It's not just BJP's fault. You just go back in time. In fact, let me tell you, in that constituent assembly, the person who fought the hardest to retain absolute freedom of speech was Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, who today is reviled as the progenitor of a Sangh ideology, which he has channeled into mainstream politics through the BJP. So you're like, ye kya hua? What is going on here? Those people are supposed to be the bad guys. But actually, people have been jailed all through. Movies have been banned all through. Books have been banned all through. Satanic verses.
Of course.
That was banned under whom? We know when it came out.
But having said that, of course,
so it
other
is
parties
important.
may have laid the precedent.
No,
that
so
doesn't mean that this particular party needs to continue.
But we need to have, now, if you ask the BJP, and I have asked this question of other people also. So unofficially they say, but I can't understand. The Prime Minister is very confident that if you're questioning, let's say, the status of our roads, then the person he's deputed to do that job should go and answer those questions. Let them be accountable. And I am accountable. I mean, I make them accountable. I'm the boss. I mean, can a CEO constantly go out and give sound bites everywhere? Now, that is what they say. I don't agree. I think that there should be a meet the press or face the press every 1 month. Right. Now, you can say that, there are a lot of channels, but have a open press conference and let's have it out.
Like previous prime ministers used to do. And
which one?
Manmohan Singh had press conferences. 2. Yeah, but he did.
He had 2. Yeah. And there also, Siddhartha, to be very honest, because I was there in different capacities, at least at one, covered it. One knew that there were vetted questions. It wasn't as if it was an open
So you're saying
forum.
you're saying that when you were a journalist going through these years, even Manmohan Singh had vetted press conferences.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fact. No prime minister in this country, I don't think, has given a interview without, asking for the focus of the interview to be discussed. Not with him directly, but they will ask you कि भाई क्या जगह पे क्या बात हो रही है.
So it's not as free as कि मैं एक reporter हूँ और मैं जो चाहे.
But let me tell you, this is true. I have interviewed international heads of state. I have had to give all my detailed questionnaires.
So what about the investigative part of journalism then, where you
so we have to
hold them
separate
accountable?
Those. So you have to separate 2 things. So investigative journalism is done to expose a particular crime, after which you begin to ask the questions when you're certain of the fact, right? Now, those questions can come up, obviously, in very open forums. Like if a journalist wants to get up and say, no, actually, and that has happened, I don't want to talk about what you want us to talk about or this press conference. I want to ask about some X or Y, that happens. And it should happen more and more because the answers have to be forthcoming. You have to judge the response by the amount of follow-through questions that are acceptable. So a person might say, okay, skip first question ke liye to I'll have a great answer, but that person's first answer may not address everything of the question. But will you get a second chance?
Right.
Now, that is where the real test comes in. And I feel that we have never had that tradition. Not that it excuses, the present regime or anything. I'm just saying we've never had that tradition.
So that's such
because I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
There's been a concept of the Mai Baap Sarkar. The Sarkar has been thought to be the greatest benefactor in this country because there are a lot of people who think that hamara aadmi aayega to hamare ko ye milega. It's a patronage. It's like a court, So you become Shahenshah and you dispense largesse.
So is it safe to say that the claims कि ये प्रधानमंत्री press conference नहीं करता are unwarranted because it's not just a tradition in our country?
No, I won't say that. I think you make the tradition, right? So you'll have to ask this question to Mr. Modi. But I just feel that we should move towards a situation in our democracy. Like, for example, in Britain, I hate quoting our colonial masters, but they did a few things well. Like, for example, they have question hour in Parliament, where the Prime Minister asked every, Friday, I think it is, where he's asked a question straight off.
Yeah, I'm just going to have to adjust your mic just a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Take it, no problem.
So I think question hour should be part of the fabric of our democracy, where the Prime Minister asks a series of questions, and who better to ask them than parliamentarians themselves, because they represent us.
I'm now going to quote from the book, if that's okay.
Yeah,
I made some highlights which I thought were very interesting. And these are often scathing critiques of a certain Lutein circle that you previously mentioned, but I thought this was interesting. So you said, for a section of India's intelligentsia, any inquiry into these questions or into India's Hindu past is driven by an exclusivist mindset fueled by narrow religious fanaticism. For years, there has been a concerted attempt by the rootless anglicized elite, as writer diplomat Pawan K. Verma describes them, to de-hyphenate Bharat Hindu's roots from our civilizational history. Then he observes the ingrained hostility to India's Hindu civilization also stems from the ill-informed claim that this is essential to preserve the nation's secular fabric. Now,
So
this word...
I think this dehyphenation you have taken out of, they took the Hindu out of the Indian.
Yeah,
I think that's the chapter,
three.
right?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that's the chapter. So I think I even take you back to where this thing has come. So machinations of the Marxist mind, and just before
It's a
that
bit
here.
before that. It's also
So,
there in the introduction.
Yeah. The
So-
reason I mentioned this is what caught my surprise was the part where basically we are hostile to the India's Hindu civilization because we think it's important to preserve our secular fabric.
Yeah.
So I want to help you unpack help me
unpack.
unpack the
Your
word
view.
secular for fabric. Yeah.
So sorry. Carry on.
No. So I think at the time that we became independent and our founding personalities decided to give us this constitution, there was a debate about whether or not the word secular needs to be included.
Yeah.
And the eventual consensus was that let's not have it in the constitution while we remain a secular state, in the sense that everybody has the freedom to practice their own religion and even propagate their own religion. The state will not identify itself with any one religion. That was the overall consensus. But there was a debate about whether or not we should include the word secular. The great sages like Nehru and Ambedkar eventually decided not to go ahead with it.
They were begin with against it.
They were against it, even though, if you read Abhinav Chandrachud's book, The Republic of Religion, he actually says that B.R. Ambedkar initially had promulgated something called the Establishment Clause. So the clause basically would explicitly state that you will not identify with any one particular religion. Like you have an Establishment Clause in the United States Constitution,
Okay.
where the state cannot have religion. Similarly, there was such a clause that was inserted in our constitution, of course, over deliberations, that was eventually done away with, and mysteriously, B.R. Ambedkar did not object to it. One of the reasons why we did not include the word secular is because we don't fit the actual proper definition of secularism, which is a complete divorce between church and state. We're not secular because the state administers hundreds of thousands of temples in this country. That's a direct interference on the part of the government in matters of religion. So how are you then secular? We're also not secular because...
he's being very intellectual about it. Now let me tell you in one short way. देखो भाई ऐसा है कि हम लोगों को ये बीमारी है कि if you want to make people happy, they'll stick with you. तो भाई, how do we ensure that we make some people happy? You give them things. So you make allowances for certain religions.
I have spoken to Anand Raghunathan about the Waqf board.
Many things.
The Waqf board is one instance. I think it's quite debatable. One should even ask
So
as to
you
why
have-
you need a minorities affairs ministry in a state
That
is
came
secular.
later.
That came much later.
After we
but yeah.
became a secular, officially a secular democracy, but उससे पहले भी आप देख लीजिए,
Yeah.
certain personal codes, were left untouched.
Correct.
अब वो कैसे होगा? If you were a secular country, that would be impossible. So Nehru instead scratched his head. He said, यार अगर ये हम secular बना लें अपने आप को by word, by definition, we'll be held to it. We'll be held to it.
Correct.
By that, so we won't be able to do all of this. How can the state fund religious activities or control them? But हमारे को तो घुसना है.
And how can you reform religious personal laws if you need the license to actually intervene, which is what they did with the Hindu personal law through a series of amendments over a period of time, where
So
the
you
Hindu
spoke to
personal laws
Dr.
were actually
Ranganathan, right?
Yeah.
He would have told you
He
this. as
says
well.
that, like, for example, ये जो शबरीमला में हुआ, where the deity is in a particular avatar. Now, in other Shabrimala temples, that is not the case. There, women are allowed entry. But in this, यहाँ पर वो brahmachari stage में. So, when the god is in, or the deity is in that particular stage, that there are certain things that flow from it, that he cannot be exposed to menstruating women. Now, you can say it's sexist. But that is a belief.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that is my belief. Now, belief you can't legislate belief, right? Otherwise, then get rid of all religion, then become like, a French state which wants to do that and make you completely, lie seete. वो यहाँ तो चलेगा नहीं, बिल्कुल नहीं. So, the argument is don't touch religion. Forget it. If that God is in that brahmachari state, in that deity is that, let that be. Let that be the only exception. After all, you're also multicultural. You want to preserve your multiculturalism. Then if you make everyone equal, then culture ka bhi vaat lag jayegi, as they say. I'm now using terminology that people will use. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that this is where the thing was. अब आपको लोगों को खुश भी करना है और दिखाना भी है कि मैं एक को पनिश करता हूँ कि आप फिर देखो कि you'll be so good, well treated. तो ये भी आपको करना है. तो ये गेम था. And come on, tell me something. Before 76, before the word secularism was introduced in the constitution, were we some communal republic?
I'm not sure.
We survived for, what is it, 30 years?
Yeah.
My history is only as young as 97.
So that's what I'm saying. ऐसा थोड़ी हो रहा था कि we'd become a communal republic where certain denominations were held imprisoned and all of that. ऐसा थोड़ी था. We were not doing what, people do in...
So the word secular has actually been misused to such an extent. Now it's debatable as to whether or not you want to remove it. The point simply is...
It's very politicized. I can't even know
it's
what
come
it
to
means
mean the
anymore.
opposite of what's supposed to stand for.
So let me tell you, there's a little reference here in our book where Abhishek Manu Singhvi's dad, Mr. L.M. Singhvi, he tells Indira Gandhi that, look, agar aap ye word dalenge, to a problem hogi. Because, we should be
पंथ
निरपेक्ष, not धर्म निरपेक्ष. धर्म तो हमारा ethics का एक philosophical construct है. We are what we are because we are a dharmic people. Dharma should not be confused with religion. So the word धर्म निरपेक्ष, how can you use? क्योंकि धर्म तो is your ethics, your code of ethics. How can you say without ethics you should be? फिर तो you'll be jahil. You'll be a barbarian. So they started scratching their head. But it went through. So in the Hindi constitution, it's Panth Nirpeksh, not Dharm Nirpeksh. But the word secular, unfortunately, the way it is used, cuts through everything. Because it's an imported word. It's an imported value system in that sense. We were innately secular.
I can only remember my civics books, because civics books always had two taglines. One was unity and diversity, and second is we are a sovereign, secularist or secular republic.
Yeah.
Now that is the idea of
India.
India.
You should flip it. Diversity in unity. That is where we should be.
Okay. So I grew up with that, and as I was growing up, whenever I say this, and I get lots of flack from very aggressive Sanatanis in the comment section whenever I say this. When I was growing up, like as a Hindu, we had some rituals, हम कुछ पूजाएं करते थे, कभी मंदिर जाते थे. And as you become a teen, you're rebelling and understanding your relationship with God, if he or she exists or not. So you sort of move away, and then if you come back, whatever, right? You live a pretty normal life. But there are no, in my opinion, my experience of one and a few of my friends, there were no tight boundaries about what it meant to be a Hindu. Like there was no too many defining exercises about कि Hinduism क्या होता है, Hindu कौन होते हैं. For me, it was always a bunch of rituals. स्नान वान ले लेना, ये सब चीज़ें कर लेना. And then once the Modi government came around, I found that the identity not only became extremely well defined, it also became political. And now those of us who are like, who are we? Well, we are Hindus. Well, we're not the kind of Hindus जो वो लोग हैं या फिर वो लोग हैं. And so we're in this very weird limbo where if you say openly that you're a Hindu, you are actively considered to be on the extremes. So where does someone who's still, I don't know, figuring out who they are as a Hindu, where do they go in a country where it's becoming very increasingly politicized to just be born as a Hindu?
You're saying that Hinduism is becoming more Abrahamicized or more Abrahamic, so to speak.
Probably.
With a certain set of dogmas and certain red lines that are being drawn, if not necessarily by...
No, he's saying, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying that today, if you invoke your Hindu identity, many people think of you as some sort of a religious kind of reactionary. That's what he's saying.
Or agar aap, let's just say if I'm not a very strong, openly out and about Hindu like Yogi Adityanath, right? Then I'm not a Hindu at all. That is the other problem.
Okay.
So I'm saying this not as after having read your book, ya fir, after having like watched the discourse. I'm just saying this in my lived experience it's becoming hard to understand, like, what can you do with this identity? You know, and maybe it's like those of you on the right, you don't have such a difficulty with this because it's all pretty available to you. You can just, read a bunch of books and figure out, like, what is the appropriate way to define yourself.
I think we represent contrasts to this because I'm probably a bit more religious than you are.
Yeah.
And I think Rahul's case study is very interesting, I would say, and I think you should talk about it because you would identify yourself as a Hindu.
Definitely.
But he's not a ritualistic Hindu, at least from what I've seen.
Absolutely.
So what does that mean?
Yeah.
So, I'm not somebody who will do puja every morning. I'm very ill-informed about rituals. When someone passes away, someone's getting married, other important milestones in your life, Hindus mark them in a particular way. I'm very ill-informed about all of that. And I don't pretend to be otherwise, but I'm a Hindu. Because I don't look at the word Hindu exclusively as a religious word. I look at it as a primary identity of someone who belongs to a denomination or a system of values that preaches just about anything. Everything goes. So if I'm a Hindu, I can be atheist, I can be an agnostic, I can be a spiritualist, I can be, mildly religious, I can be anything I choose to be, and I'm accepted as a Hindu. So it's not like in certain other faiths where you suddenly declare yourself to be, Ahmadiyya, and you find yourself in a lot of hot water. Or if you're a Shia, then
Or an Ismaili.
Or an Ismaili, or, Hazara, whatever. There are many things that, or if you look at, on the Christian side of the fence, then, Protestants, Baptists, this, that, there are these, actually, it's not even a way of life, it's a view on life. A way of life also means that you have to live your life. It's a view on life. And it's your Hinduness that you're expressing. So I think that legitimately you're right when you say that there are people who are beginning to get a bit nervous, that we are up against a large bunch of other faiths, I'm not going to name them, that want to extinguish your open way of life and make you something, like make you them. So that's what they'll say.
Would you think that extends to India also? मतलब मैं समझ रहा हूँ that the Islamic world has sort of.
देखो जी, मैं एक जगह से आया हूँ, कश्मीर से. मैंने तो first hand देख लिया. Now I can't speak about the rest of the country, but some people say that in certain pockets of this country, and I don't want,
especially in border areas, and there's a recipe for instability where the demographic imbalance might create a security issue.
And some people
which has
say
happened
that
in states like Assam. We can't.
And Bengal, some pockets where they say we are not allowed to celebrate our Hindu festivals. Now this is, a lot of it could be documented, a lot of it is undocumented and then blown up.
Allegations, yeah.
Might be allegations, but I do meet people who say this. Now, have I physically gone there at that time to see if that is the case? In some instances, you're beginning to see, religious festivals now being targeted. You see it on both sides. It is happening. And that's unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. And also I'm seeing politicians now playing a role in trying to sort of, play up one person's faith and traditions or festivals and the other. And it's become competitive,
But I see where he's coming from. Yeah. I think what he's asked is a very pertinent question, because what he's also pointing fingers at is that there is a certain fringe which has arrogated to itself the authority to determine whether you're a Hindu or you're not a Hindu.
And it happens on the other side also.
Whatever your beliefs are. And that's unfortunate. That should not happen. What we do in our book is also, in fact, draw a comparison with Pakistan, because there's this entire beast of a Hindu Pakistan that we might become, that certain opposition politicians have been hinting that we might be heading in that direction, actually openly suggested. Shashi Tharoor used that expression. And we actually give you a fairly detailed kind of an argument as to why Hindu Pakistan is never likely to happen. And let me just draw upon one point that you raised. In Pakistan, the Ahmadiyya community was never considered to be part of the Islamic fold. And this is a debate that actually goes back to pre-independence. But in Pakistan, they've been officially excommunicated. They're not considered part of the Muslim fold at all.
But are they citizens?
They're citizens. But for example, if you have you're applying for a Pakistani passport, and this is a legacy that goes back to Ziaul Haq's time, you have to sign a declaration saying that you do not identify Ahmadiyyas as part of Islam. So therefore, they're not considered Muslims. They're actually considered non-Muslims, even though they might have citizenship rights. And there's been a long-raging struggle on their part to be identified with Islam. However, the powers that be, the religious authorities in Pakistan, have decided to basically excommunicate them. In India, you have enough sects within the Hindu fold who might even reject the authority of the Vedas. One example that or question the authority of the Vedas, we go back to the time that Basava in Karnataka, present-day Karnataka, began the Lingayat sect and drew hundreds of thousands of followers.
So Gautam Buddha himself was a reaction to a lot of what Vedic Hinduism was about, right? Yeah. So he, there was no priestly class and all that. Later it happened, unfortunately, even fortunately or fortunately, whatever, it happened even in the Buddhist tradition.
In the specific case of the Lingayats, if you go back to the campaign, the Karnataka election campaign, say almost 5 to 6 years ago, there was a huge controversy over a demand being made by certain sections of the Lingayat community to seek a separate minority status. Because some of them did not want to be within this, identified directly as Hindus. They wanted a separate minority status. And certain politicians within the Congress party were amenable to that kind of a demand, but there was a huge resistance. The BJP actually stepped in, and Amit Shah actually had a meeting with the members of the Lingayat community and said, "Hum vibhajan hone nahi denge," which basically means that we are not for separation. Now, you might have a certain different tradition within the Hindu sect or within the Hindu fold, but we're okay with that. We'd want all of you to remain within the Hindu fold, as opposed to a diametrically opposite example that you've seen in Pakistan, where people in authority, as far as religious matters are concerned, took it upon themselves to kick out one community from the fold. So in India, it's the opposite. So what's happening in terms of certain people saying you're not a Hindu, that's really unfortunate. It's not taken the form of any kind of political endorsement as yet. It might be quite prevalent in the social media, but we should not go there. Yeah.
So I just want to quickly read out one little paragraph, if you don't mind. So on this question, if ever India were to become a Hindu Pakistan, an outcome that Tharoor has feared in his 2018 speech. Now, here are things. Okay, so under the header, neither a Hindu Pakistan, can India be tolerant without being secular, is the chapter. So we write and we say, first of all, we would need to mandate that only a Hindu could occupy the post of president or prime minister, whatever the case might be. For Pakistan, when it officially became an Islamic republic in 56, had added such a proviso, giving pride of place to Muslims and disqualifying non-Muslims on the ground of their identity. But as you know, in India, we've had, prime ministers and presidents from the minority community. Next step towards a Hindu Pakistan would be to introduce a repugnancy clause in the constitution, which means no law shall be enacted which is repugnant to the injunctions of Islam. So basically, you give a primacy to one faith and say, usko koi criticize nahi kar sakta. No law can also be passed to curb the tenets of the faith or anything that flows from it, or any practice. Then we say that given that consensus even emerges on this, a Hindu Pakistan would have to formalize Hinduism as a state religion, right? As the Pakistan Constitution in 73 declared an Islamic state. Once this is done, a Hindu Pakistan would have to declare that not just the president but even the prime minister has to be a Hindu, because the executive pe aap aa jate hain. After this, a Hindu Pakistan would have to start identifying heretics within the Hindu fold and proceed to declare them as non-Hindus, just like Pakistan did, as he said, declared Ahmadiyyas. Now, we have heretics. As he's saying, we have people who say that, look, we don't believe in X or Y. Then, in case all of this happens, chalo theek hai, can anyone be a heretic in Hinduism in any way? So we asked, the 12th century philosopher Basavanna rejected the caste system as well as ritualistic worship. while some among them have sought separation from Hinduism when he created the Lingayat fold, demanding a separate status in the state of Karnataka, advocates of Hindu unity have resisted this attempt. And then lastly but not the least, all of this would have to come in, and you would have to then determine which is the God that we must worship, or which is the book we must follow. You will be spending 2000 years just debating amongst yourselves.
Right.
Because everyone has...
There's too much to go around.
So as I'm saying, intrinsically, you cannot think of these concepts where we come from.
From a speculation standpoint, we'll get to the book back in a sec. What do you think is going to happen 2024? Is Modi going to win? Clear? Because I've actually spoken to an astrologer friend of mine. I don't know if you believe in astrology, but he said it's going to be a clear mandate and he's going to win, and it's going to be the toughest PM you've ever seen. But that's purely from astrology.
Now I'll tell you something. A very funny thing happened. I was outside a bookshop a few days back, and I bumped into a politician who had with him a visiting astrologer, supposed to be India's best.
Okay.
Number one astrologer.
Okay.
And that person told me that in his website officially he's declared 360 seats for Modi. So I don't know. Look, I just have to say that the BJP fights an election in a very organized way, because A, they have a leader who's been in office, B, they have a machinery. It's cadre driven, and a lot of the prachar is done by the RSS, so it does manage to reach, and it's the fastest growing organization in the world.
Really?
The BJP is the fastest growing political party in the world. The RSS has been expanding in India. The statistics are mind-boggling. And we think that the RSS are these bunch of fuddy-duddy males only, but the growth has been amongst youth and women. So there are statistics and you can see them. It's difficult, to, if you were to believe the other side, it's difficult to think that, these guys, as they say, they no longer wear half pants, but arey, ye half pant wale, ye kya batayenge? But in many places, the first responders are RSS workers. So when there is a crisis, they get there first. And in many cases, they are spreading. So politically, the messaging right now is that, look, we will hold a caste census. That's what the opposition says. And they think that will touch a lot of people. Plus, what are they trying to do? They're also saying that, look, we will contest only one seat against the BJP, all of us. So it happened under the Janta rule. So they put 1-1 candidate in many states and in many constituencies against official Indira Gandhi Congress candidates, right? So the opposition votes did not fracture. Everyone came together to vote against. Now, in many constituencies of this country, the margins of victory are narrow. They are not 50% plus, right? In the Hindi belt, the BJP is better placed. It has a big gap between the other political parties taken together and their own electoral victory. So in some cases, I think it is about 75 seats where the BJP has won above 50% majority. So they have significant gap over the other parties. So it's 16-17% to bridge that. Sorry.
And the BJP, especially when it comes to Lok Sabha elections, primarily in the Hindi belt, so to speak, they do remarkably well. Their strike rates are almost 100% in some of the states.
Yeah.
In Rajasthan, they won all
Gujarat.
25 seats. In Gujarat, they won 26.
Chhattisgarh saved one. Opposite exactly what happened.
So the margins with which they win give them a huge advantage, especially in the northern side of India. It's in the south that they're quite vulnerable. Now, a lot of people are saying that this coming election is going to be some kind of a semi-final. It's quite difficult because if you look at the previous trend from 2019, in 2018, the BJP did not win a single state out of the 5 state elections that went to the polls towards the end of that year. And yet, in at least 3 out of those 5 states, in the Lok Sabha, the result was completely the opposite. The BJP almost clean swept them. So, with Modi as the Prime Minister, I think it would be safe to say
he has an advantage.
Yeah, he has an upper hand.
But you can never second guess the Indian electorate. I mean, जैसे एक dialogue था एक हिंदी फिल्म में, public सब जानती है. So you can't fool all the people all of the time, right? So it will be, I think, a tough contest.
Yeah.
if you were to ask me right now, I think Mr. Modi, just because of his brand, is the front runner. It's difficult to see somebody being taken credibly on the other side right now. But, there are local factors at play. We've come out of a very stressful 3 years. Okay, COVID. And just before COVID also, remember, the economy was in a bit of a downslide. So it wasn't like that. It was like that, and
Right.
now we are coming out of it. But I think that the reason why, and you see, if a government was very confident that the fruits of its development work had begun to change the narrative on the ground, I would have thought that they may not have extended this big subsidy. Now, there's a debate whether it's been extended for a year or for 5 years, but basically, or for 6 years rather. I think Mr. Modi extended the food subsidy because there might be a worry that if you withdraw it, then people will feel very vulnerable, and that will create a backlash.
And politically speaking, I think the India alliance is still an incomplete project, and I'm sure a lot of people agree.
I was going to ask,
Yeah.
what do you
And
think
on the
about
other
it?
side, don't forget,
Yeah.
there is this, so,
If you're going to decide to contest one seat,
yeah.
and you're looking at about 400 seats in the fray as far as this entire alliance is concerned, they're an alliance that are rife with contradictions and differences.
So let
to
me
come
tell you,
to that consensus might itself be a challenge.
It might be, but there are 3 states. Look,
That's okay.
where there are 3 states where if the NDA is held back, it could have a overarching effect on the large number. So we are talking about Maharashtra, where things
48 seats and all.
48 seats, big state, second biggest by the number of parliamentarians it sends, where the BJP, there's a coalition there, right? And you don't know which way things will go, right? Now, there, the BJP, with its previous ally Shiv Sena, did fantastically well, right? So those seats came into the kitty. Now, that ally is halved. That Shiv Sena is halved, or
The
some
opposition
people
is
say it's
also
not even halved, it's 3/4 one
Yeah,
side.
most of
and-
it went to one side.
Yeah,
with the-
so how will the people see this? We don't know, right? Then Bihar. Remember, Bihar was a great result. I think they only lost 2 seats there. But again, it was with JDU, Nitish Kumar, and BJP contesting, even though the BJP did better than the JDU in terms of seats. Now, from insiders in the BJP, they'll tell you that this time, we will do better than the number of seats we personally got, the BJP personally got. But you can't discount what the NDA, what JDU brought, right? Because that allowed that number to go from 303 to 333, I think 331 or something like that. So those are 2 states. And then, of course, there is this concern. And so those numbers were, good. The other state is Bengal. Bengal mein, the BJP did very, very well in the Lok Sabha. 17, I think
They got 18 out of 42
18
seats.
out of 42. Now, will they be able to get those same number of seats? Now, if those reduce by, let's say, 10, you're down from 303 to 393. You lose 10 in Maharashtra, let's assume. I'm not saying it'll happen, but then you're down to 383. By some dint of fate, you lose 10 of what you won in Bihar. You're straight away down to 273, which is exactly halfway. Right? The NDA ke jo the 30 other seats, we are not counting because a lot of those people are no longer in the NDA. So those have already gone. So there are problems. It's not a complete cakewalk right now. So if they manage it in these 3 states, they'll at least get the numbers that they got earlier. And of course, all this is with the proviso that they win all those seats that they won in the Hindi heartland with those numbers.
So the statements that saying ki those are troubles when Modi aayega are just statements, like electorally they might not always be backed up. Is that what you're saying?
So look, I'm not a psephologist.
Okay.
But,
As you mentioned.
But I can tell you that look, there is always anti-incumbency. You've had 9 years of rule. And maybe the people will say that, okay, they'll do a cost-benefit analysis. Now, how they do that? Will they do it? Okay, we can't expect Modi ji to be a magician. We can't expect him to undo, as he says, everything that happened for 70 years before I was there in 10 years. Now, if they give him that benefit of doubt, then maybe. If they don't give him that benefit of doubt, then there's a problem.
So in the India alliance, beyond Rahul Gandhi, do you think there is a leader or a set of leaders who could give a challenge? Because like the title says, it's Modi and India, and then you said that the India represents the India alliance in some way. So
let me give you a quick example. Look at Mamata Banerjee. She wants to be the challenger to Modi, but when the party tried to contest elections in other states, it
Lost.
came a cropper very badly in Goa.
do you think language is a barrier? Because pan-India, like Hindi is a defining factor for winning elections. Is that the case?
Not really.
It depends on where you're expanding to.
Yeah.
Of course, if the TMC wants to make inroads further up north, then it might struggle. But it has a very strong presence in the state of Tripura, even though it's never come to power there. But it has a strong.
It's
presence
flattered
there.
to deceive.
Yeah.
So that's the problem. Acceptability of other leaders. So Rahul Gandhi is the only person who is, at least as far as the opposition is concerned, known across the country.
Correct.
So he has a pan-India, people know him. They say, okay, from south to north, people say, we know Rahul Gandhi. Gandhi Parivar ke hain, we know him. I don't know if there are other... Kejriwal has positioned himself quite effectively, but is he really a phenomena of the urban, more metro-centric constituencies? In Punjab, they've done well in some rural areas, but again there was a crisis. There was nobody on the other side that could attract and be. So wherever there has been a strong leader or a strong party, the AAP has not been able to challenge the established parties. Where those state units are withering or where there is a complete collapse of credibility of the existing leader, the AAP has done well. So, but the AAP is not a pan-national. They don't have the resources right now. They're growing young party, credible in what they've done. It's brilliant. But, right now to say they will challenge Modi at a national level, difficult right
Still
now.
Still a few years away from that.
They might be a few years. And, there's so many allegations against them and all that. We don't know how that has gone down. After it was a party born out of an anti-corruption movement. So you don't know what is happening, how people are sort of reacting to that.
I see. What was the toughest part about writing this book? Because it's certainly a mouthful to read and then a mouthful to talk about. So what was the toughest part about it? Beyond the fact that, you were busy to corroborate and annotate the facts.
Time.
How many years did this?
No, not years. You were given 3 months to write this book.
3 to 4 months.
And we used to get up
5:30 in the morning and then write for about 3 hours in the morning.
Wow.
Then we had a full day
obviously there was no possibility of giving the book any attention while you're at work. But it was mostly done at the home for about 3 hours in the morning, and then if you were lucky enough to reach home by around 10:30 at night, maybe an hour later after that. But yeah, it was quite the struggle.
So I'll tell you what happened was that one of the editors at Penguin came in, Primanka, who we owe everything to. Primanka Goswami came into my office and I was in my cabin, and with him was Vikram Sampath. And Vikram has written a seminal Moti Kitabs.
Of course.
So we were like, wow, these two guys have come. And then suddenly I was having this conversation and they said, why don't you write a book? So I was like, yeah, okay. I mean, where do I have the time? So Primanka said, look, we are wanting you to write a book on the elections, on the upcoming elections. And we would like you to write something like what we had published earlier, what Rajdeep had written. So I said, look, I'm not that kind of guy who goes out to, the ground and talks to people, meets people, analyzes trends, or is in khabari from parties who put stuff together to work out how an election was won. So that's not my jam. I'm an ideas guy. I want to interrogate the main themes. So he said, okay. So he said, okay, how will you do it? So I then started speaking about what is the main concern, what is the main question that people are asking, कि मोदी हमारे देश का करेगा क्या? Right, that's the other side. See, India, one of the I's stands for inclusive. Why have they put it there? Because they're trying to say that those guys
are exclusive.
They want to create a Hindu Rashtra जहाँ पर आप लोगों को equal rights नहीं मिलेंगे. So that's the main mota thrust, and it's called the developmental, this thing. So the other part is that look, on which numbers can be twisted any which way. So that's something that is not definitive. I can't say that it'll be foolish for me to write a book to say, no, Modi has done great development. Because even he'll say that, look, a lot of work is to be still done. So I can't, how do I interrogate the ideas that are So then I came up with this and I said, look, give me some time. Why don't we meet again? So I just thought to myself, I said, first of all, it's going to be a time thing. And then who's going to, basically, it's not something I can do alone. And he just said, look, it has to be written in 3 months' time. And I was like, what? He said, yeah. And I said, how many words? He said, about 60 plus to 70,000 words. I'll do that much for you. I won't ask you to write more than that. I said 60 to 70,000 words. I write editorials, I write pieces. So I know that it's a significant ask, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay. So I got panicky and I wanted to do it because the book was in my head, right? So I thought to myself, I said, let me just think of an outline. So I quickly went to the whiteboard. I wrote certain things. And I think that outline has remained pretty much, Siddharth, what it was from day one. And then I asked Siddharth, I said, look, Siddharth, would you mind coming on board? And so he says, okay. So I just felt that, I didn't want to be in a situation where I'm like exploiting a colleague. So I just said, look, why don't you come on as a co-author? And his eyes immediately lit up. He says, really? So I said, yeah, let's do it. Come on.
Yeah.
You'll be co-author with me and we'll do it. And look, I'll give you sections to write on. And I think we agreed. And, we just followed it like I would just say that, okay, I think it was something that was waiting to be written. So it flowed, right, from my mind. Of course, Siddharth would say, can you say this? Like, should we not check this? I said, yeah, no, I realized. So he would then go back and there is one, error in the book that someone has pointed out, which we hope to address. But it's not because of us. It is the research of somebody else that we are quoting, but maybe that person didn't quite do their homework. But anyhow, that was received information, attributed information. So I'm not taking any claims for what was wrong there. But there's this one small error. And there's one very irritating.
We won't tell you what that is. But yeah.
One very irritating thing.
Is it a misquote by someone?
It's not a misquote.
No,
it is an extra A.
Oh my
Anyway.
God.
But
it is in a...
But we won't tell you where that is.
And
but
it's in a place where I was like, it can't be in that place. Why?
No, but we've got
anywhere
to
else.
We've got to own up to it, and I think if ever this goes into a reprint, at least the Kindle versions manage to rectify it.
Yeah.
But we'll of course address that. But I think just to add on to what Rahul was saying, we come from two slightly different perspectives in terms of our own approach to this book. Now, Rahul has spoken about a cancel culture, about a certain prevailing ecosystem that was trying to ride roughshod over anyone with a contrarian perspective, in the past at least. I work behind the scenes more often than not, and therefore I'm not really exposed to this kind of adversarial approach against me.
Too late now.
Huh?
You're on this podcast.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've not been at the receiving end of any hate so far.
I think because this is a considered, and look, it's a balanced book.
It's quite balanced if you actually read through the fine print.
It's very balanced. Yeah. There will obviously be people who will point out, but we don't want to be, we are not writing an apology letter. Correct. Right? That there is also something that happens in our country, and it happens everywhere in the world. So, when something is under a spotlight, it looks bigger.
Of course.
Many people say, oh, when you come out of the camera, when you're out in public, tum to bade patle ho yaar, you don't look as heavy as you are. So I said, yeah, because you're in a frame, tight frame, right? So when something is under the spotlight, let's say there's a riot that has happened or a lynching. Now that is played up as if that's the only thing that's happening in the country and that everyone is part of it and part of the background of it, which is not true. But that becomes, because it's so spotlighted, highlighted, and people are whipping up, and social media has been around now for 10 years to really, in a very effective way, everything that is an exception is taken to be the norm. So I'm not going to address every exception. Yeah, of course. You can't say that, you by and large say that, okay, we are not going, but the BJP says this, that leader said that. So we addressed a few of what the leaders have said, but there are hundreds of leaders on either side.
You can't have all of the information in
I can't have a caveat for every guy who's spoken every word. And some of them have spoken it in private capacity. They would say it in any case. It's not just because they're in the BJP they're saying it. Some people are lunatics. Now, what can you do about lunatics, right?
Even if you talk about the term Hindu Rashtra, for example, which many people view as a negative kind of a term, which will exclude minorities. Yogi Adityanath did use it in his very first interview after he became Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh. But if you see some of the senior people within the BJP, at least at the center, the Prime Minister, as Prime Minister, has used it once. And we actually cite that instance when he spoke during the debate on the Citizenship Amendment Act. And he said, Jawaharlal Nehru himself, at the time that he was corresponding with Liaquat Ali Khan, who was the first Prime Minister of Pakistan, he was basically telling Liaquat Ali Khan that you need to protect your minorities. You need to protect your Hindus and your Sikhs and so on and so forth. So therefore, was Nehru campaigning for a Hindu Rashtra is a rhetorical question that Mr. Modi asked the people who criticize the BJP of wanting to make India into and on record. This is in the proceedings of Parliament and on record. Like you said, Amit Shah during an interview in 2019 when he was specifically asked, विनायक दामोदर सावरकर जी हिंदू राष्ट्र के बारे में बात करते थे, क्या आप मानते हैं कि हम हिंदू राष्ट्र हैं या फिर बनेंगे? Amit Shah, being Amit Shah, though he's one of the more kind of, what do you say, brusque politicians when he's even addressing the press, he did say, no, absolutely not. हमारे लिए एक ही धर्म है और वो संविधान है. So he was able to contradict what the interview was trying to
And the way in which the Hindu Rashtra is pitched by the RSS, for example, is in the larger philosophical construct. It's not a religious construct for them. It's a larger identity. So, the closest approximate identity one can think of is that of a people, right? That we are of, a kind of ethnic group, larger, like Europeans, or we are Western, right? Now, that has no religious connotations, that has philosophical connotations, that if you're Western, you'd be this, that, the other, right? That way, as a Hindu, not in a denominational sense of the term, but in a philosophical, dharmic sense of the term, you subscribe to value systems. And some of them are universal values.
Sure.
So John McCain, when he was the presidential candidate for the Republican Party and taking on Barack Obama, had said that America, the Constitution identifies America as a Christian nation. That was his interpretation. And being a Christian nation does not necessarily mean that you exclude other communities. But the values that the Constitution derives some of its provisions from are derived from a certain Judeo-Christian ethic. That was the larger import of what he was trying to say. And he could say this openly as a Republican presidential candidate in so-called the world's oldest democracy, as they like to call themselves. A short while before that, Barack Obama had actually been in Turkey with the then Turkish president. And Barack Obama actually said that we're not a Christian nation. We're a predominantly Christian nation, but we're a secular nation. So this is a debate that's even raging in the United States. Perhaps some might say it's a bit less volatile than it is here.
The current foreign minister of Britain, who was then the former prime minister, he's talked about, being a Christian nation. And I think, we have to understand that there the connotation is different because Christianity it's an ism. It is a dogma. So is, Islam. It's a dogma. We are not a dogma. But, as I'm trying to tell you, this book is an important dive into what we are and what we can become and what we will be, despite the efforts of certain people who want to hijack the tradition and turn it into something. And right now, those people are not in power. In Europe, however, something is happening. Some of those people who want to hijack a particular kind of expression are coming into power. But they're doing it because when you return to certain fundamentals, that is what those fundamentals preach. There is a supremacism inbuilt in certain faiths. Now, what can you do about that? If someone wants to, elevate that and sell it and package it, but in India, you can't do it because you are disagreeing on what the fundamentals are.
I have a few more questions.
Yeah, sure.
Not about the book anymore.
Yeah. Oh, what a pity.
No, I'm going to weave it in.
Yeah.
You had the famous McAdams controversy, let's just say.
Yeah.
It was so funny to me because that is when I first saw of you. In hindsight, was that a pleasant thing, a delightful memory of your journalistic career? Because it was certainly memed so many times.
So look, I've had 2 of these incidences.
What was the other one?
Why would I want to give that away? But certainly the McAdams one was like, look, I'm an opinionated journalist, right? And I think it came out of 2 things, because I speak my mind, and people were like, ek din isko padhegi, you know? And it didn't happen because someone was able to contradict me intellectually. I still believe what I say, and a lot of people believe what I say. It's the Ukraine debate. But someone by mistake had changed the...
Was that person fired then?
No, he wasn't fired actually. That person has gone on to become a successful entrepreneur in your side of the fence, on the digital side.
Really?
Yeah, and he was, he's a brilliant young man. And I had brought him, I had worked with him in NewsX, then he joined Times Now. So he's a very key component of our newsroom at that time. And it just happens, you know, it's live TV.
Yeah.
I can't say anything. I love the person who, you know, I think that he's one of the brightest young talents around. You know, he's even younger than Siddhartha, I think. So, you know, they were very bright people. And it just happened, you know, that someone wrote the wrong name and I took it out on somebody. But I called back McAdams on the show 2 days back.
Must be full of laughs back then.
Yeah, but I sort of took a sort of sarcastic dig also, because I said, "Theek hai, at my expense, you're also becoming a bit of a, you know, a known person." So he was like, yeah, okay. But, you know, I think 2 things happened. It was in the COVID times, you know, just coming out of COVID. People were quite, you know, still wound up and they wanted some release to ek to wo hua.
Yeah.
Second, on the left, of course, said, isko to ragdo. Ye banda bahut bolta hai. So they basically made it viral, and obviously it was funny. It was a bit crazy. And, you know, it was bonkers. And yeah, the one thing it did make me feel, you know, for 2 days I was like, this is awful. This is not me. I've never done this kind of thing. I have a bad thing with names. I'm very bad with names in any case. So I can't go on air without the list of names. I make a lot of flubs on names. I can't remember people's names at all. It's not an excuse.
What's my name?
Vinamre. But I can mess it up very badly. So I am sitting there and I'm thinking, you know, what is it that made these guys so active in forwarding this? There's always truth to humor, right? So I said, okay, so one thing I have to do is to let other people speak a lot more. The second thing I have to do is to calm the, you know, whatever down.
No,
just
you
calm
can say
down.
it. You can say it.
So
We're not
I
on
said-
national television.
I said, I'm just going to calm down a little bit. And I have, in that 1 year after, really, and you know, I found that a lot of people began to watch, and the ratings also for my show went up phenomenally. And I continue because I think people are looking for, you know, conversations. They can be, you know, like we had pretty intense conversation and interspersed with, but people want that. They want substance, right? They don't want this rhetoric-based shouting, you know, let's do a, you know, like an arm wrestle equivalent on air. So I think I moved away from that. I became a little more, I took lessons from it. So, and I spoke about this at the Goa Fest, and, you know, it was self-deprecatory at some level, but I think it really stood me, you know, in good stead. It was a good thing to have happened.
How do you, so I have a question about, so we are now standing, I guess, at the bridge of 2 different industries, right? I mean, there are people who can just build an audience out of nothing. And then there are people like you who work a single career. And when I was in college, I also took some communication studies and journalism classes. Like there's some basic principles, adherence to truth, deliver facts, all those things, right? Content creators have no problems around those things, no ethics, just like no ethics, no adherence to truth. It's about like what works, you know, what do the audiences want? So when you see, I would not call content creators or YouTubers new media, but I would say they're media parallel in a lot of ways. What do you think about this new class of people emerging who are basically, if not competing, at least delivering information or infotainment to the same age group or interests of people that you have been?
Look, I have a son who is 20. Right?
Okay.
He goes to law school. And he gets a lot of his news from people like you guys, both, you know, internationally and nationally. And sometimes I worry as a parent because, look, we are held to certain standards. Like, you could do a McAdams, but you won't be held to those standards.
No.
It may not become...
We'll make it go viral deliberately.
Yeah. But it won't be something that you will be faulted for, because man, sab chalta hai. In a certain different ecosystem. I'm not saying it's wrong or right.
But it's also independent, so we don't have to have...
Exactly.
We're not answerable to an institution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now here, we work with legacy media that's been around for years. They have a brand to defend. You have to go out there and be sure what you're saying, because you have other people in the system who can hold you up. They can sack you. They can take your job. Right? You're answerable to a set of laws. Right? And those laws are invoked because the public is told by our channel that, look, if you find something objectionable, something that you can write into PIB, you can get a notice.
So you're subject to broadcasting laws? Because
yes,
creators aren't subject to any laws, as far as I know.
So you might be less, I'm not saying that you are, but you might be less inclined to say, let me do my due diligence. I have to live up to those every day. I have to also attribute religiously every day ki bhai, I'm saying this, but it's come from here. The source line, all of that has to be put in. A lot of work goes in. That's why there are a lot of people. It's a people-intensive industry, because everything has to be vetted. What you're seeing on air, and there are mistakes. And we're all humans at the end of the day. We're not AI robos that can change things. Like anything will happen, and we'll be like always. There are times when people are overworked on a shift. They might be switched off at that moment. Something goes past. And it does happen from time to time. Then we also have our own self-regulatory. The media has its own self-regulatory body, which holds trials. And whether you like it or you don't like it, sometimes they rule against you and it becomes talking news and it becomes big. It goes viral. Dekho, humne to bola tha, ye to aise hi hai. But I'm like, that happens like once or twice in someone's career. And sometimes you don't have the right. You can go to court, but then you say, forget it, yaar. If the NBSA has made a particular ruling against you, ab main kitna ladunga, forget it. I'm ruled by social media guidelines. I can't just say anything I want on social media. I have to be very nuanced. I can't just say that, a lot of people make a lot of racist and sexualized comments and all sorts of crazy things. I can't say all of those things. I can't even say things against particular leaders or particular people unless it's fact driven, right? It's an advancement of our journalism or a story that we've done. I can't just say, this is what I feel. I can write an article.
So you're representing your news organization on every single public platform at all times.
I'm, there's nothing called private view. You can't say your personal view, Eji, because it reflects on and it's, I'm glad that I'm held to those standards. So it does worry me that there are people who might be out there, who my kids might be listening to, who might be off the wall. I mean, I was watching this crazy documentary between Amber Heard and, Johnny Depp.
It was the public trial, yeah.
Yeah, it was horrible. I felt, I saw the misogyny in society, and I felt bad for Amber Heard. I'm not saying that she's innocent of what she's been accused of, or even the other.
But there was a witch hunt against her.
Or even if Johnny Depp was, it appeared so. And there were all these variously vague kind of people who were wearing masks and doing podcasts.
Yeah.
And I was like, they are even anonymous and they're doing this. I can't even I don't know who this guy is behind this mask who's spewing all this crap. And they were getting millions of hits. So I'm like, okay, and they're making money out of it, which worries also. Because, then if you're making money, then you've got to also be due diligent. You have to do your due diligence because then there's a certain... And look, you then become a parody of yourself. If you start down, let's say, this crazy, masked, commentator, newscaster kind of thing, then what is next?
Well, right. I think one of the reasons people like to be anonymous is because then they can freely speak their mind. I used to be very against the idea of anonymous accounts until I was spoken to by a few friends who have anonymous accounts, and they said that one of the things you can do is you can get away with speaking the most blunt form of truth.
Yeah, but it should be in public good. It should be in public interest.
Anonymity also gives you protection against all kinds of, or protection from any kind of prosecution or action, despite you having used that anonymity to abuse. And
that is true.
Hate.
See, sting operations.
And that happens a lot.
Which we come close to in, as an anonymous expose, is a sting operation, right? They don't know who you're speaking to. If you want to sting somebody, who you think. But again, there are laws there are rules, unstated rules of ethics that define when you must sting somebody. A, it should be a public figure. B, that person has done something against the wider public interest. Again, people ask you, who are you to arbiter what public interest is, right? I mean, that's fundamentally that question could be asked of you. But something that basically means that they're breaking, if they're a person in power or in authority, they're breaking a law. Then you sting them. You just can't go into... I mean, I could right now say, Acha, this Kasana says all these things. Let me expose him about who you are. How do you know? I might be wearing a wire right now and I might do a podcast on you.
I've already mic'd you up twice.
So that's what I'm saying. So there are these issues, So everything can't be laissez-faire,
True. But I think the space that Vinamre now inhabits is one that has actually led to a lot of democratization of public opinion on a completely different platform. And I think this was very much the need of the hour. I studied in Toronto in Canada. And at the time that I was still a student, podcasts were not necessarily a means of information so much to learn about a particular subject, but it definitely gave you a lot of exposure to the polarizingly different points of view on a particular subject. And I used to actually listen to conservative talk radio in the United States. We used to be able to download podcasts while we were in Canada. So be the Hugh Hewitt show, the Leonard Lopate show, or for that matter, Dennis Prager, among a whole host of others. They started podcasts about 20 years before we got them here. So we were a bit late in the business, I guess, in terms of podcasting is concerned. But I think the social media space and the digital space has a plethora of different content, which India has now been tapping into over the last 10 to 15 years.
Well, the one advantage, I suppose, the West does have, we don't have radio talk shows.
We don't.
Yeah.
And
it's
they
very
also doubled up as podcasts back then because you were able to download that content on your iPhones or not an iPhone, obviously, an iPad, an iPod, which is what we had back in those days, and we could.
You're that generation, right? No, hang on. No, so basically, there was a tradition. Now, that's also because free speech there is looked at very differently. Yeah, you're allowed a lot more. You're given a much wider.
You've got people like Howard Stern, who got away with the kind of interviews that they did.
No, I mean, because free speech is really something that is valorized. There's a guarantee almost, and it has its pluses and its minuses. As I said, the conservative in me is coming out a little bit now. So I don't believe in absolute free speech. I think, especially now that people have all these, my daughter is 11 years old, and the other day, much to my horror, I found her what? She's on, 'cause I'm not going to give her a mobile phone till she's 15 or 16. And there's a big debate going on because now the schools expect you to have a laptop to do your homeworks and submit them. Uske baad, then they find ways, kids are very creative, they find ways. So suddenly I found her listening to some vague thing. And it was about makeup trends and all that. I say, 11 years old? What is she doing? And then I got worried and I started telling my wife. I said, and then she said, no, this, So then now we have to monitor what.
But it's inevitable, right? It's going to happen whether you like it or not.
I mean, and as I said, there are positives, as I'm saying. Look, there's so many whistleblowers who have been able to say a lot of things and expose a lot of people. So if it's a force for good, bring it on. But then it has this other side to it. It can spark riots, instability, it can turn electoral verdicts, it can...
Social media content creation? I don't think it has that much power yet. At the best, you can manufacture a trending controversy on Twitter. I really think TV still has the power.
I'll tell you, there was one big thing. And, there was a news event that took place. And I think most of the national media failed, which was the SSR issue.
Right. Oh, yes.
Right.
Of course.
Now, look... I know that there are a lot of people out there who believe a particular thing happened, but was there, and I regret having gone down into the trenches as an editor and brought out some of the stuff. I'm not proud of that time, right? So, and I have publicly apologized about this, as well as another incident that happened, which I thought we as a media really did ourselves a big disservice, which was when COVID first began, and there were these markazis, who were held responsible for spreading COVID.
Now, the Tablighi Jamaat?
Yeah. So, look, there was obviously, a certain degree of how should one say, risque behavior on their part, but was it malevolent? I don't know. Right? As far as I know, the courts have basically been able to come to a conclusion that it wasn't real malevolence. So from that point of view, I think we tended to err on the side there of malevolent actions. And I think the media, I speak for myself, I think I'm not talking about the rest of the media. You can ask those editors what they think of it. But as an editor, I think that that was not a good place to be in, where you sort of suggested that, okay, one particular group of people were waging a particular kind of act, against the state. I think that was wrong. And I do see around me a lot of words that I use very loosely on either side of the fence. I mean, the introduction, I sort of weaved in those words. I think I can read them to you. And
Bhakt, Sangi, Musangi.
How these labels are just sort of thrown about to castigate, people. And it's what happened in America. And look at the backlash against Miss Clinton when she called somebody a basket. That's why I use that. A lot of people say, why did you include it?
That was so smart by Trump to weave that in his favor, by the way.
And I said that's because that is what is happening. And it's wrong because the other side is bombarded. They don't have the tools to reject that, categorization. How can you fight it? If hundreds of people are saying it, then you're the one voice saying something against it. It doesn't work.
So Rahul, tell me something. What is the future of legacy media? And I'm only asking you this not as, aap batao is desh mein kya hone wala news media ka, but because a lot of the reason for the rise of independent, you can't call them journalists, because I've seen several YouTube whistleblowers or case study guys oftentimes ignore primary sources. कई बार conjecture ले आते हैं, कुछ ज़्यादा conjecture ले आते हैं, more than what is required. But you see that these guys are competing for the same eyeballs, and you see that even like India in the Generation X, even they're like watching YouTube and Twitter and Facebook for news. So where do you think legacy media is going to go now? Is it going to adapt completely to the digital format and become more, like you were mentioning, I guess off camera, saying, hey boss, or Gen Z-fying your lingo to, I guess,
Yeah, look. First of all, I think we're in very exciting times. The more the merrier. Great, bring it on. I think there's some things that have gone wrong where legacy media needs to sort of look back on. But, I see a cycle. So back in the West, where, news broadcasting was really birthed, right? In the 1900s, 1910s, 1920s, you had these, penny papers, or you had what was known as yellow journalism. Then you had the golden age that went up till the 70s, so-called golden age. Then it started sort of turning, and now it's to the point where it's divided. So you have a bunch of people expounding one idea on something and a bunch of people expounding another set of... So you have to watch two different things to get the picture, right? And that is happening in India also. And I think that the next will be going back to legacy media. See, for example, one particular content creator, which is New York Times, is doing fantastically well.
But everyone loves to shit on them, particularly like all the billionaires.
Look, I'm not talking about that. There will always be people who will be, to use your phrase, shitting on you. That's because, that's the nature of public discourse. There will be people who agree with you and there will be people who disagree with you. 50% of people you expect to walk into a room, as John F. Kennedy said, would be against you. Concentrate on the 50 that are with you and and hope that those 50% who are against you will see some sense in what you're saying and switch. Right?
But you were saying NYT is doing better.
But yeah, I mean, they're doing it's got a great model and it has done very well on the digital space. That's legacy media. There's Guardian, there's lots of other people. I'm not just talking about profits. I'm just talking about the brand resonance, right? It is still taken as a golden mean. And in India, you have certain legacy media that is taken as the golden mean. And I think a lot of people say, oh, sarkar ka ye dabav hai, sarkar ka dabav. Every government in this, in a democratic system wants to control the narrative. They're in the business of winning elections. This is a universal fact, right? It depends on you as journalists to draw the line, where you want to sort of give and what you don't want to give, right? If you are somebody who wants to submit yourself, then that's on you. Right? Then you can go out and do whatever you want to do. And there's space for that. People who said, yeah, I just want to be something for the sake of being something. And they found that maybe they could sell it. They're out there selling it. So I think that we are going to go back, and legacy media is going to be strong. You're also going to have people who are independent, whatever that means. I don't know what that means, because it seems to suggest. So, as I said, these labels are created by people in marketing exercises to distinguish themselves, right? To say, we are the real ones, those guys are the fake ones, right? Mm-hmm. And then people shift for a little while into that domain, and then they say, okay, but I think we need to quickly find out, if these guys are speaking the facts, and they do a couple of Googles and they say, okay, we've been had here, but it's, that trend is, those people have made merry during that trend, and they go back to what they consider was the foul media, which was the legacy media. So this has happened world over. I just feel that the one thing that is changing is consumption patterns. So people are not watching TV like in a fixed frame. It's coming here. So you will have news anchors, great legacy media. It'll just go through another pipeline.
Yeah, the reason I discovered you is on Twitter.
Yeah.
Through clips rather than like watching TV.
Yeah. So a lot of my friends are into that. And I'm like, okay. So, but TV is still a communal exercise. As in, you bring your whole family together. There are certain events that you have to watch on TV, like the results of the general elections. आप एक कोने में बैठ के
अकेले नहीं देखोगे, मजे नहीं आएंगे. Even if someone's on the street at a chai stall, you will still gather around the phone screen and try to watch it together.
I think a lot is sort of made of this demise of electronic television, TV. It's not going to be. We'll be forced to really look at our models again. And in India, there are other reasons why TV doesn't make money, and a lot of it is to do with the rating system, which I feel that
which is what is called TRP.
Yeah, which is not really something that captures it. It's like a big survey that happens. You need a lot more, what are the barometers, to read. There are very few barometers for the number of TV sets and TV consuming households. So how do you get an accurate picture? So once all that is sorted, hopefully we'll be able to, inspire faith in people who think that there is more out there. It's good. Sometimes I watch some of those people and say, great. I mean, there are people who also do very good work and are very well researched. I mean, you've taken pains to read this book.
It was my duty.
That's what I'm saying. So it's your duty, right? So you're one of those guys who's led by a particular ethos, right? Who says, "Theek hai." You could have easily sat here and been generic with me and said, so
what do you think about the fate of India, sir? What do you think is going to happen?
Why is this book? Why have you written this book? Then I give you the thing. Then you pick up on something and you say, let me ask them. But you've actually made notes. You're quoting.
Yeah, it's because I took half a journalism class in college. Maybe I don't know. I think what you're saying is
maybe you have an ethical and moral backbone.
Maybe, or I'm using a metal stunt in my back to hold that together. But I think because, like I said earlier off camera, that this industry of creators who have also decided to venture into news and politics, because there isn't a governing body, it generally comes down to personal ethics, right? And it generally comes down to, I guess, borrowing from legacy media, but then where the transition is if you're not armed with the facts, you can always say it publicly, and that's okay, right? But I think as a member of the journalistic class, if you're presenting something, you must have the facts, because I'm sure, like if you say I don't know, there's a huge cost to pay when it's live.
I wouldn't like to say that I don't want to give ourselves credit where it's perhaps not due, but I'm not saying that we do a public service, but we have a responsibility, a very, very important responsibility in a democracy. And one has to be able to subscribe to a higher value system to execute that democratic right in our system. And I think people who are not, they have themselves to answer, their conscience to answer. I think, that's really what it is.
Yeah, you were saying that, eventually people are going to shift to legacy media. I just have a prediction. I think what's going to happen is these industries are going to start working together, and content creators will learn how to, I guess, be more journalistic in their approach as opposed to be more overtly sensationalist. Because if you look at the way people, even on YouTube, think, case studies operate, it's like, what is the title? What is the thumbnail? And that decides the story, not the other way around.
I'll tell you something. Every time this conversation happens, I think of history.
Okay.
It's the best thing to do is to look at historical trends. So you had religion. You could say that the people who were the proponents of a particular religion, when they came up, they were called all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Right? But they got so many followers. Then they said, now we are responsible for these followers, so we need to come up with a code. And they codified their beliefs. So it was there in a book, which was certified by them. It's in a book, right? Then you look at politicians. They're also in the business of creating eyeballs, attracting eyeballs and constituents. So first, some people used to stand up and say whatever they had to, and there would be a free-for-all election. Maar pitai bhi hoti thi, sab hota tha. Then they said, no, boss. When we govern, then we are hoist by the same sort of petard. Same set of rules are then applied to us when we are in power. Then we're kicked out. Now, if you want to be sticking on in power, you got to do some good also.
Right.
So then you start doing good. Then you define your ideology. Then you create. So they become the mainstream, constantly becoming the mainstream. Mainstream is reinvented to the point where I think we've done very well as a human race. We've evolved.
Wow. What an optimistic note.
Yeah.
Very costly aberration.
Those are mistakes you learn from. But I think the general direction is towards refinement. We're not going back to, the cave.
Yeah, I also think viewers have become far more skeptical, and they can, spot BS from a mile away.
Exactly.
And they always, whenever
more power to them.
Yeah, whenever they tune into a program, they already know instinctively if there is a bias at play or if there is a certain side. It's certainly led to a lot more divisiveness, but it's also led to a lot more clarity.
See, very quickly, I don't believe that, you can have an opinion. You can be biased as long as the facts are not fiddled and fudged. Look, I use this analogy quite often. There's a single charge sheet. It goes to a court of law. Charges are framed. Then there are two sides. One says innocent, one says guilty. And they argue from the same facts. But facts hilne nahi chahiye. Facts hilne lage to a problem.
Yeah.
But an FIR or a charge sheet is also not gospel at the end of the day.
But there is a collection of facts which then you put down in a court of law, and you leave the judge, who is the public here, to arbitrate that case. But you do an honest job of at least saying, okay, this fact happened, and therefore the other person can contest that. Sure. You can say that, no, maybe it didn't happen. But, you have to allow for that space of the ideas exchange. You see, you can have an opinion. You can then call people to say, okay, you might say, okay, I believe Article 370 should go. I believe what Modi has done is right. Right? And you start a debate. But if you only bring those people that say, yes, what he's done is right, then it's a loaded show, right?
Yeah.
So it's good to have somebody from the other side who says, no, for these 4 reasons, then let them speak. It's not quite true. That's where I think I've done fairly decently as a journalist.
Is it tough to moderate voices from each side on a live show?
It's absolutely difficult, because 90% of the time they have nothing substantive to say, that they're going to attack you. That happens. Or B, there's a lot of whataboutery, and then they'll say, but you just stopped us from speaking. I said, look, I have time pressure, 28 minutes. If you're just going to go off on some tangent, it's not making a material difference to you, but it's making a material difference to the poor viewers tuned in to learn something. So I have to get you back on track. But they'll keep shouting over you, and they'll keep shouting, and then you have to shout over them, and it becomes crazy.
That's why the lukewarm water, to preserve your voice.
So start bringing in people, my advice, who actually talk sense.
Yeah.
And who have something to say.
So
just a question,
of course.
Since you're an anchor as well.
So just before you ask the question, you just tilt the mic toward you.
Sure.
Sorry.
Do you see us transitioning as a media industry, especially the broadcast media industry, to what the United States has become? Not just on the broadcast front, but also in print, where publications or anchors would take openly political positions and say that I back this particular political party to win the upcoming election. So, for example, like you saw with the Trump election in 2016, the New York Times, among a whole host of other publications, came out with open op-eds saying, we will not support the candidature of Mr. Donald Trump, we'll back Hillary Clinton for so and so reasons. Do you see that happening in India over a period of time, maybe not in 2024, but maybe 2029?
How long have you worked with me in the past? 6 years?
Yes.
7 years. I've been advocating that publications should wear their affiliations on their sleeves, but there's one caveat.
Which is what?
Okay, so let's say tomorrow you want to endorse Rahul Gandhi. You say, for these reasons, because the liberal manifesto of the Congress appeals to me, I endorse you. But then have the guts, when that politician is not following the promises that that politician has made, which you have endorsed because you think it's good, have the guts to call that politician out. Then you can endorse. If you endorse only to cancel the other, there's a problem. So I feel that we are already there in an undeclared way. We need to be there in a declared way. So the guy who's watching you, or the lady who's tuned into your broadcast, or the woman or whatever has tuned into your broadcast, knows what they're getting as long as you're intellectually honest.
Yeah.
So you say, okay, the BJP should not have tied up with the PDP. You should have the guts to say it. If you don't say it, then you're being wrong.
Like in America, they have Anderson Cooper on the Democrat side. He's very clearly on the left, and then you
have Fox News, for example.
Yeah, you've got Tucker
You have
Carlson.
Hannity, and
you
you have Hannity and Combs and all of the others who
Yeah.
typically
What I
support
find deplorable in our media circles right now is the immaturity of some of my colleagues who cannot have a reasoned discussion and will label people. There are whole publications that are only based on critiquing the media because they want to shift people or they want to pull out people. They won't have the guts to have an intellectual conversation with you. So you have an N number of fact checkers who are peddling absolute agenda in the name of fact checking. They will not fact check their own side. They are not doing justice to this profession. And they have the gall to stand up and ask people in legacy media that, "Arey, tum to ye nahi kar rahe ho." So, you know, there's that. And they're immature people who don't want to get into a room and have it out and say, okay, let the better side win tonight. Let's go up. But they'll cancel you. They won't come to your shows. They'll say all sorts of nasty things about you. And today, because they have the loud mouthpiece of Twitter and this and that, it's dangerous. I mean, I'm called so many things. I fear for my life most of the time. Mere ko kaun defend kar raha hai?
You think some of your colleagues are...
You whip up hate against somebody.
Yeah.
You know, it's like this. Like many people say, oh, you whip up hate. I said, fine. If means taking on Islamist fundamentalism is Islamophobic, then more fool you, my dear friend. Or if taking on, let's say, someone on the right, you know, on so-called Hindu right, who's a reactionary, if taking them on means I'm letting down, you know, I'm being Hindu-phobic, then more fool them. I want a decent, atmosphere to be built where there is reasoned and logical debate.
Do you think a long career of being a TV anchor can make someone perpetually unable to have a long-form conversation? Do you think that is possible because they're so used to stirring up the pot?
Dude, we've spent...
more than
No, not you. I'm just asking from your colleagues. Like, have you noticed that every single night you're going on, and you have 30 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and does it do something to your ability to hold a long-form conversation, or you like to speak the truth?
No, I think it just comes down to your own personal values. I think speaking the truth, or being a BS artist comes down to how you view yourself and what compromises you make with your value system. It's got nothing to do with formats.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, amazing. You pointed out the time, so I'm going to respectfully end our long-form discussion, as you've clearly demonstrated that you, in fact, can hold it on for so long. But no, thank you. I think, thank you for giving me the time to at least parse through some of the topics of your book. Where can people find this book? Where can they purchase it? Should they have the inkling?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
They should purchase this book because if they really want to know what they're voting for and why they're voting, and they want to cut through some of the narratives that are out there, they need to be well informed to exercise their franchise. And this is an attempt at making sure that the voter knows when they press the button, they research, they know why they're pressing that button. For or against, it doesn't matter, but they must know. They must have a reason to do so.
So where can they find it? I have the Kindle version. I bought it 3 nights ago.
It's available on Amazon on Kindle. It's out in all bookstores. It's also available on Padega India, which over the last few days has been offering some generous discounts on this book as well.
So I saw it at Bharison's Booksellers also in Khan Market a few days ago.
Yeah, and we've also been approached by a publishing house in Karnataka. Penguin has to buy the rights so that there's a Kannada version of it in Canris. So let's hope that
Amazing.
Also.
And where can people follow your respective handles to be updated with your lives/opinions?
Well, I actually don't post a lot on Twitter or Insta, but I'm available on platforms, and I'm more than willing to engage with the public at large. If you have any feedback about the book, I'd be more than happy to respond.
I think most people are just going to ask you for internships. I'm just going to be honest. So what is the username?
It's Siddhartha Talya on Instagram.
Okay, awesome. And
I'm at R Shivshankar on Twitter.
Okay.
And I don't know what I am on the others because I don't go on.
That's okay. That's okay.
I don't go on any other-
Twitter is the main source anyway.
Twitter also I've just learned how to do things with, but
Yeah.
I'm a Luddite.
But no, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for
Thank
coming
you.
all the way
Thank you.
to
Great
Faridabad
to
to make this conversation happen. I wish you the best of luck. And
Thank you for being researched.
And
That really matters
no,
a
it
lot
was an
to
enjoyable.
us.
No,
It matters a lot to us, actually.
I'm so
So, thank
surprised
you.
that is something that is the thing that strikes out. But okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank
Thanks,
you.
buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was Anand of my life to do this book. And I will be honest, guys, when I was reading the book, I was like, how will I even manage to do this conversation? Because these guys are stalwarts of their field. And I'm just
No.
actually, I should, you know what? Like, I think there's this one little cheeky thing that content creators do where they say, I'm just a content creator. But everyone has biases. And, I wanted to play devil's advocate and show that all is not what it looks like on the other side. But I think both of them, have actually written the book and not had a third ghostwriter write it. So, more kudos to you guys. And you can follow the podcast Tuesdays, Fridays, 12 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Bye-bye. Take care. Sayonara.